All right, gonna go live in 3, 2, 1. What's up, guys? Andrew571 here.
And 6682. And what's the opposite of metal? I don't even know. That was a pretty bad intro. That was the worst intro I
Oh,
think I've ever done.
that was glorious. um, yeah, It's funny. Like I was just filming a video and like in order to like I don't know try something different for the intro, I gave a "What's up, guys?" Andrew571 just to try
Oh
it out,
no,
and it does not suit me. So
it's too bad.
yeah, maybe one day I don't know. The other route is to get into the Hawaiian shirts and tile it up.
I need to buy a lot more of those. Thanks for reminding me.
Uh, I need to buy one of them. My first one.
I think I wore the only one I had on one of the Odyssey reviews way back when.
Yeah.
I gotta find one. I gotta have one somewhere, and that was like the only one. So I need way more.
For sure.
Anyway,
Yeah. Nice to see everybody in the chat. We're just doing a casual Saturday Hangout live stream. I slept in this morning, so I'm a little bit without my wits about me, but at least I'm wearing the right headphones for this stream. Unlike
yeah.
somebody.
I'm trying to trigger people because I have the 660S on,
Oh
but
yeah.
my 650 is right up there, and like purposefully not choosing the 650 just to make
Yeah.
people angry.
So the question that I would have is, which pads do you have on the 660S? Is it the new ones? And
Uh,
do they sound the same as the 650s and the 600? Because apparently
yeah.
those are...
Apparently now there's three different types of pads as far as I am aware of.
Yeah.
There's the original ones. Maybe there's been another one since the 90s. I don't know. I haven't owned them that long. Um, but I know there was one. The original was probably like up until I want to say what was it, like a couple years ago, I think.
Hmm.
Whenever the 660, I think when the 660S came out, they decided to rev the pads, and that was the second version. And now I'm hearing there's a third one coming out or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like I have no idea. I don't know if like some of the 5K features that are showing up on some graphs are due to the second revision pads or if that's just the way the
I
650 is. I don't really know.
Yeah. I have some thoughts on that. Actually, um, did you see, I think Amir measured the 600 and 650 and said that they sound the same, but then there was some
Oh
question
God,
about the
yeah, I saw
pads.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, if you're gonna compare the headphones, the pads have to not only be fresh, but now with what we know, they have to also be the same revision pads
Right.
apparently, which is just like
Yeah.
this is something that gets lost on
Yep.
a lot of people watching because it's just the problem is viewers can only review what's right in front of me, and that we don't even know if there's going to be revisions when you watch the video 5 years later. Like
Yeah. And
it's really funny.
it gets to be another challenge as well when you don't know. So, for example, if you get a headphone through one channel, there might be different pads than if you were to get the headphone through a different channel. Like, for example,
Oh,
if a community member, like I'm just noticing as well, like the recent HE6SE measurements that were posted on
yeah.
ASR, they are way better than the ones that I measured. And I was like, what is going on here? Because like the ones that I measured, like the headphone, the HE6SE, came directly from Hi-Fi Man. And I think
Okay.
in ASR's case, they came from a community member. So I don't know
Wow.
what pads are on that one, and like, or which ones are representative, or which ones are like the closest to what people would be buying, and because literally, like, I have no idea what people would be buying because it came from Hi-Fi Man directly, a review unit, and that's potentially different from if you were to buy a retail unit because who
A
knows
lot of
what.
people will go through dealers or some of them did are my cords really twisted? Wow, I guess I lost. I'm really non-audiophile now. Yeah, this
Yeah.
I literally just put this cable on here. Sorry, guys. Um, I already had to apologize to the chat for not being perfectly audiophile friendly cable wise. Anyway, what was I even saying? Oh yeah, yeah, a lot of people will buy through a dealer, and if that's different than Amazon versus a direct sale, I mean, yeah, that's really strange, but also like
Yep.
I'm not surprised. Plus,
Yep.
lots of people will rev the pads out of Z without saying anything about it at
No, but
all.
we should probably talk about that to a certain degree because that
Probably.
was like it was a big criticism I remember in the Headfi thread when I released the measurements of the new revision LCD-X and XC.
People got really angry
People
over
got
that. I
riled up
know.
because they're like, well, these revisions, they're I mean, I think it was partially because of a communication issue, like not telling people like as clearly which is which, but they did indicate the serial numbers, right? But I think,
Well, after people asked, I mean, they
yeah,
didn't.
yeah.
They didn't really just. That's the thing. Then, but yeah, continue.
Oh, I was just gonna say like the message that I think is important to, or the thing that's important to remember with that in the context is that literally every manufacturer has revisions. They're just not as extreme of a difference as what's going on with Odyssey, with the pads. Like, I mean, Sennheiser is even talking to Jude, like, who knows more about the Sennheiser, the way that stuff's developed, and
He's like the only person who has like probably direct access to
yeah,
some of the
well,
engineers. I wish they were more open.
yeah. I mean, I think it's also from when he was chatting with Axel Grohl when Axel Grohl was with Sennheiser,
Oh right.
but also like he expressed how tight the tolerances are at Sennheiser and how like they are the tightest that he's ever seen, and like how like
Oh
how
yeah.
everything should be exactly the same. And even in the best, so like imagine that that's the best case scenario, right? Even in that scenario, we're seeing these revisions show up and differences in pads and things like that. I mean, Focal's had the same question about the pads and all that. I see actually somebody in the chat talking about that.
Yeah. Is the MG
Yeah.
the same headphone except for
So
the pads?
you're right.
I
Yeah.
haven't heard any of that stuff. Actually, no, that's not true. I did hear an MG locally, and
What are your thoughts on it?
I, I didn't have a clear side by side, so it's
Oh,
probably useless. But honestly, it definitely ranks just like the clear. It sounds like one of the most like instantly correct sounding for the most
yeah.
part, like
Yeah.
headphones. Like they
Yeah.
really kind of have that reputation of being like a super HD600, HD650 kind of a thing. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not exactly the same. I mean, what is it, the 1.5K thing that a lot of the
Oh yeah,
Focals have, with a
yeah,
little
yeah.
small bump there.
Yeah.
But like it's one of the headphones you put on, it's like, wow, this actually sounds like normal, right? As opposed to like there's peaks here, there. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy, but anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's I have serious problems when I listen to music and I'm like, no, this peak's somewhere. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, this
Yeah.
is why I was a reviewer anyway, but
Fair enough.
but
Getting back
yeah.
to the 600, 660, and 650 and that stuff, and the 5K peak that I've talked about. I actually think that's more when you see measurements that don't show it. I kind of think that's either due to pad wear or due to the measurements not being done with the right clamp force or representative clamp force, because they do.
Positioning and clamp is such
Yeah,
a difficult thing to do,
especially with those.
even on really well designed rigs. Still, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
Which is isn't there? There's a pinna that's a lot more realistic, right? And it's like softer and has more give, so it's better for on ears and whatever. Which one is that? I don't remember.
For
There,
the Gross.
one of the one of the Gross pinnas were there was a version that was easier to seal stuff on or something, I think.
Oh yeah, so the 43AG is easier to get a seal on than the 45CA,
Okay.
and this is what Sean Allen
Right.
and I were talking about. Which, by the way, I still need to get a poster to have like right there for
Yeah.
praise be.
I suggested if you guys watch Linus Tech Tips, which probably everybody does here, there's that Bliss background, the one from Windows XP with Linus's face. We need Sean's face on there instead. It'll be
Yeah.
the best poster I've ever seen. It needs
Yeah.
to hang behind resolved. Anyway,
By the way, guys in the chat, let us know how the audio levels are if one person's louder than the other, because we did have some
yeah,
technical
I
hiccups.
certainly don't know. And even as someone who streams, I'm not sure if Resolve knows either. So if
Yeah.
anybody is too loud or
Yeah.
quiet, let us know.
It's easier when
Um,
it's just one person.
Yeah, definitely. Someone is saying, "Oh yeah, Rhino wants to talk about the LCD one. Let's talk about the LCD one for a little bit."
Yeah, that did sort of fall off the radar.
I bait that like that review was like the beginning of the end for my for my channel, because people were so angry at the fact that I had gotten it under NDA early, and I couldn't talk about it. So by the time it came out, everyone's like, "Wait, this is the MKBHD of reviews, and
Oh
like
my
you
God.
gotta be working for this company. It's just like, oh my God, that
Wow.
was not it at all. Now, when I said that it was better than, I probably overemphasized some parts of it, like until the very end. I don't think I mentioned that much about like, is the HC650 worse, like in every way? Not really. I mean, for me, I think I would take the LCD-1 sound-wise. And if you look at the graphs, even well, the ones that sealed correctly, I don't know what happened with the ratings ones. Got one
Oh yeah.
channel going like crazy. I don't know why, but the bass actually has better extension. It does have a little bit of a downshelf to it, but like it doesn't roll off as fast as the
Yeah.
650 does. Um, and the mids, I think were, I remember right, they were like very close to on par. It might have been slightly grainier on the LCD one, but the highs were like really surprising. Really, really nice. Not overly bright. I don't know. For some reason, all of the sound demo of the LCD one had like ridiculously bright like air going on, and I don't know. It didn't sound like that to me. And I heard two different units, so
Yeah. I'll
I
I'll
don't know.
I'll weigh in on that in just 1 second. Just gotta deal with one quick hiccup here, guys.
Oh,
1 second. The Discord is giving me some trouble. But it should be
oh,
fixed in just 1 second. There we go. And we're back. Um, so was that I was that with the that was without Reveal Plus and the base level, right? On the LCD
yeah.
one.
That's without EQ. And like when they came out, so I suggested without ever seeing the graph, I suggested what the EQ adjustments should be, and it was funny because the reveal preset was almost the same,
Yeah.
except they one-upped me because they knew what the graph looked like, and they like put a peak filter at 3K instead of 3.5K,
Yeah.
which actually sounded better. So they seem to agree with that's one reason why I like
Yeah.
talking to those guys, because they seem to agree with whatever I think is relatively neutral, which is very
Yeah.
subjective
Yeah. It's
for
tough
person to person.
with Reveal Plus though because of the different versions that exist. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
so it's like how do you create a profile or preset for like 3 or 4 different
yeah.
versions of that
The
headphone?
first thing I'll say about Reveal Plus is that all the other presets, other than the LCD one, did not sound right to me, especially on the memory foam pads. And I
Yeah.
think that's because they were all tuned for the LCDs with the original like 2016-ish pads that didn't have the memory. Actually, were those memory? I guess they weren't, because everyone refers to the 2018-ish pads to be the memory foam pads. So I guess the
Yeah.
other ones before that weren't. I don't even remember. It's been
I
too long since I heard one of
think
those.
so. From my conversations with Sankar, um, for some reason I remember him mentioning something about how the the 2020 ones were actually less. They actually had less of a run time on that, and a lot of that may have been due to difficulties with um, menu suppliers and stuff like that, especially during the pandemic. And that they had switched. They had intended to switch, and what they had done before that would have probably measured better than the 2020, at least for the LCD-X. I don't know about the rest of
Okay.
them, right? So what I imagine the Reveal Plus profile at the time would have been set up for would have been closer to the 2016 stuff, like the post 2016, pre 2020 stuff. Now, what I'm curious about is with the 2021, if they're doing an update for the 2021 revisions with Reveal Plus on all their headphones, because in theory all of the I mean
I hope
maybe
so,
you know
yeah.
more than I on this, but
I don't. I just know that people have asked that, and
yeah.
it's a very very important thing to do, because I do not like the reveal presets like on the memory foam pads.
Yeah.
They don't do crap compared to what they need to do to bring the mids back up, because
Yeah.
the mids are just so dipped on the memory foam pads. Like
Yeah.
it's just not enough. But with the 2021 pads, the mids are better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And before the memory foam, apparently, at least if they measured like Tile's old measurements showed, the mids were also better. So like, I'm pretty sure that they originally tuned them based on the old pads. So that needs to be that has needed to be revised
Yeah.
since at least 2018, because that
Yeah.
was, as far as I know, that seems to be around the time they switched from conversations with other owners. It seems like around the time they switched to the new headband, the suspension headband from the old one, that was about the time when they had to switch over to the memory foam pads, as
Right,
far as I
right.
know.
Yeah,
But
something like
anyway,
that.
well,
So,
if I work for Odyssey, then Resolve works for Odyssey chat. So, I mean, like the
uh,
amount that we both talk to, like some of the I don't want to say the big people of the industry. That's like stupid, but I guess they're like people we look up to though. Still,
absolutely.
is very similar, and we it's not that we have anything to do with these. I mean, yeah, we do have something to do with the companies. It's called wanting to talk to the people who design the headphones. It's not being paid by them, so
Yeah, it's
that's the
actually
difference.
it's amazing the kinds of like if people actually understood like kind of the like the way those conversations work, you know, they where like the way that any of this stuff works. Like there's a lot of
There's a lot behind the scenes, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's not what people think. It's not, quid
The
pro
problem is
quo.
we get a bad rep from, let's call it the
The
influencers
the rest of YouTube, yeah.
of the world, and
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
it's so disappointing. Like I can do everything in my power to try to convince people that my reviews really were unbiased, but I mean it's impossible to be completely unbiased. But I tried to eliminate everything I could, and
Yeah.
it wasn't good enough. So, oh well,
By the way,
too
just have
bad.
to on that subject, I have to address something here. DMG Play says, "Do we know that current Sandara sound slash measure like the golden unit Resolve had slash has?" If you look at
Golden
that,
Unit.
if you look at that thread, I measured like 6 or 7 different Sandaras.
Oh, did you post like an overlay? I didn't even see that.
I measured so many of them at this point. I've got like 3 or 4. I got 3 here right now, and one of them in the no 2 here right now, and 2 of them in the studio, and I just actually connected with the guy who had sent me the 2018 revision or the older revision.
Oh, okay.
So there's a big thread on that, and it goes through how all new current Sandaras that you buy from reputable dealers, generally, as long as they go through stock, they all are like the good ones that I measured, and they have been for a while. It's only if it's a and the pads, it's the pads that make the difference, and it's very obvious. It looks different. The pads physically look different, and you can tell. So there's side by side pictures of the two. So
Okay.
for people who think that, yeah, I get that it was a joke, but for people who, I still see it. Like, I mean, especially with the ratings, thing.
We've both been accused of genuinely working for
Yeah,
Hi-Fi Man or Odyssey like so many times. You guys got to come up with different like accusations. That one has been done to death already.
yeah.
It's not interesting anymore.
What's funny to me about that is that people think that money changes hands, and so they're like, how much did they pay you and stuff like that. And I think to
Yeah.
myself, like, man, if I got paid for that, like,
If we did paid reviews, like you would see way better lighting and cameras in my place.
yeah.
No.
R
Anyway.
says, "Hello guys, thank you for your educating podcasts. I have a 2-part question below. When
Oh,
Torque released
this looks
his
like it's
measurements?
you.
Okay, yeah. When Torque released his measurements of the VC in 2019, you wrote that Verite were your preferred all-around headphone compared to Focal's flagships. What changed?" So a couple things. I don't have the VC. And I've never measured the VC, and I've only briefly heard it. I only briefly heard Tyler's. So I can't really comment on the VC. There are things about the default the Verite Open, that I like better than the Utopia. Like, for example, the comfort, the soundstage, and I'm going to say timbre, for whatever that is. But there are definitely things that I like about the Utopia better than the Verite Open, and it's the tuning, the detail, and the slam. So that's kind of, I mean, the slam is a tough question because the Verites have much better bass, like they have more bass, right? But the Utopia, the macro dynamic quality is actually, I think, a little better on the Utopia. So that's kind of how I would break it down. And like if someone were to just hand me one or the other, it's a tough question. I would probably gravitate more to the Utopia because it's one that I wouldn't EQ. With the Verite Open, I do EQ it. Well, it also depends on the pads because there's so many different pads that change the tuning and frequency response. So, but yeah, I'd probably still EQ it a little bit there. That's basically how I would. Now, oh, I see another question from R.
Yeah, you said you had two, I guess.
In 2019, you complicated the FR of the VC. Again, I've never measured the VC, even though we can clearly see the 2K to 4K region is way below Harman's curve, while there is a THD peak in 3K, which you would render any EQ impossible.
Don't a lot of those drivers have a THD peak at like 1.5K, and nobody said anything until I saw the measurements. I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe you're confusing me with somebody else because I've never measured a VC, so I don't know the answer there.
I complimented the FR of it after I heard it at Can Jam, without having seen a graph. I thought it sounded better than the Verite, like stock.
Yeah, I imagine.
Wise.
That's what I said. Like, I imagine if you were going to get a Verite of some kind, the one to go for would be the VC for the benefit of it being closed back, but then also between the two, I think it's got the better tuning. And again, it all depends on the pads that you're using. Now, actually, interestingly,
so
the interesting thing about the Verite that I think is a lot of people don't realize is that so much of the tuning depends, and so much of what you see in the measurements depends on the clamp pressure that's applied, and those headbands are the kind that it doesn't have a consistent clamp on on every single person. So somebody might wear it with a looser clamp, and somebody might wear it with a tighter clamp, and the pad compression can have a pretty significant, a massive impact on the tuning in FR. And so that's why when you see, like, if somebody hasn't bothered to try all of that, the different ranges of pad compression and clamp, you're not necessarily going to get a very representative FR. And that's actually why the only way that I was actually able to develop a EQ that I was satisfied with was by using in-ear microphones and EQing it not to the Harman target, but rather to other headphones in various different ranges that I like, when also using in-ear mics, or not perfectly matching it, but kind of close. And it is because of that pad compression issue. And so that's why I wouldn't take Verite measurements, either the open or closed, as like a necessary indicator of how they sound, but rather how they might sound with a given clamp pressure or pad compression, right? Also, I see you're saying Torque measured it. Yeah, Torque, I've never spoken with Torque. I don't know him personally. I've had email exchanges with him. I've talked to him on the forum, but I don't know him in person. We live in different countries, so I can't really talk about that. Also, I think he would have only measured it on the mini DSP ears, so that's not representative. Speaking of Can Jam, are you?
Yeah, I have no plans to not attend.
Took that in a different direction.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be there in Feb. I mean,
that's there's something happening this summer or like early fall, isn't there?
Oh, I don't know. There's probably a bunch of other Can Jams, but yeah, I'm just
the New York one.
I don't like traveling, so New York is easy for me to go to, so that's why I do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure when. We'll have to ask Jude that. I don't remember when the very next one is. That's like going to be the next one after COVID ended, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Enough for them to hold one. So.
Yeah, I think the ones I've seen are RMAF, I believe.
Oh, that one's back on. Yeah.
I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think. And then I think there's a SoCal one that's supposed to happen sometime in the fall. But the thing that I'm not sure about is if I can even travel there, because Canada is fairly locked down. I mean, it's not like people think that Canada. I don't know. There's a lot of misconception about that as well. They think Canada
we can
is
go
like,
on for an hour about that. Probably.
Yeah. Oh yeah. People think Canada is like jackboots at the door kind of lockdown stuff. It really isn't. People talk about like curfews and stuff like that. There are certain places in Canada that have tighter restrictions, but in BC, like where I live, for example, it's bad here, but the only restrictions that apparently exist are on traveling outside of your like health authority area, and for now, and restaurants are only you're only allowed to dine outside in restaurants, and that's basically it. There's no curfews. There's no like people aren't enforcing mask wearing. It's a very you can
Yeah, okay. That's not as bad as some of the early on
yeah like
restrictions where I'm at,
the
yeah.
like don't believe the reports that you're reading online about what Canada's like, because in BC, well, at least it's probably like
It
that in
depends,
some
I
areas.
guess.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
Canada's a big
yeah.
country, and we have very
Yeah.
different approaches depending on the province that you're in.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah,
I do like answering questions actually. The
yeah.
only thing
Let's
that
go for
gets
it.
annoying is when I get asked the same question 3 times in the same stream, which used to happen all the time back when I was still streaming, but that's all. That's okay. People join and leave at certain points. It's okay.
Yeah, I see
Let's
people.
see.
Come on, let Metal answer questions.
Yeah. Well, who was even asking? Now I'm wondering. And
um,
by the way, I don't get any of the super chats, so don't try to like send a super chat and then have the money end up in my. It's not gonna work.
yeah,
Just ask the question. I think actually we have a small enough audience that that should be okay so far,
yeah,
thankfully.
yeah.
Um, I
Is Metal
like
going?
this.
Oh,
I
go
like
ahead.
this
Yeah.
suggestion. You need to do the cost 60 ohm stuff. SC75 Porta Pro, KPH 30i. Dude, I have a collection. I think I have. So I've got a KSC 75, KTX Pro 1, two Porta Pros, 3 sets of Yaxi pads, I think, three Parts Express headbands, a KPH 30i. I bought a UR40 or was it the 20? I forget which one has the and but it broke like quickly after. I think it was like a refurb. Now I'm looking to see how I have like a whole drawer full of like this cost stuff. But anyway, yeah, that's they're really good. They're not perfect, but it's just so surprising when you spend that kind of money and you get what you get with something like a KSC 75 especially.
Yeah.
So they're really interesting. I don't know if you've ever actually heard one, but they are
So yeah, briefly I heard Tyler's
super interesting.
at a
Oh,
meetup,
okay.
but like at one of those meetups where like nobody's actually listening to gear and everybody's just hanging out talking about it and
Yeah,
drinking.
that's that tends to be what happens at Camp Jam. It's very hard to
Yeah,
get to everything because of it.
yeah. But I actually wanted to ask about that because having not spent time with the Porta Pros and all that stuff, um, if you were to like, I know people talk about like it has really good value, right? But as far as the like quote unquote technical performance and detail and stuff like that, compared to over ear headphones, what level, what range would that fit in compared to sort of like normal
Um,
over ear headphones, because it is technically over ear as well.
it depends on it obviously depends on which one. Each one sounds a little bit different, not just because of the driver and the unit variants, but because of the housing as well, which is something that I
Mm.
had forgotten about. The KPH 30i and the Porta Pro have like exactly the same driver, but because the housing is different, like some of the peaks are lesser or greater. But honestly, like despite the price being like 15 to what, like $50 or something at the high end for those, they seem to compete well with like I would say 100 to $150 like other over ear open backs. It's really surprising.
like
Like
like K three
that's
seventy
what I
one
think.
level.
Uh yeah, kind. I mean the base quality is not quite there.
Yeah, of
I'm talking
course.
about like I guess cheaper open backs, which also don't have like the best base quality, but like there are situations where I would rather take one of the open Cosses than like 598 or something or 599. Those things are still going for like I think 200, $250 or something ridiculous right now. I don't know
Mm.
why they're going for so much. They used to be like 150, but I without EQ, I mean the Cosses. That's a hard that's actually a hard choice depending on
Yeah.
like with EQ, I think the Sennheiser does better, but it's so convenient. So
Yep.
anyway, yeah, that's what I think about those. Um, Somebody asked me something specific. Oh, am I gonna upgrade from
Yeah, I
that
saw
thing
that one.
too?
Yeah.
Um, not yet. So I
Wait, which
tricked out mine though.
which
So
wood is that?
this is bamboo, which I don't like actually.
You don't have the Shedua.
Yeah, I know. I like ever since like these rings are this is a 2018, so I guess they run certain woods, certain years, and certain ranges. So that's just what was there. This is actually an old headphone from when Max Settings reviewed it, and I'm like, yeah, I'll buy that. And so I bought it off of him. I think it was like 650, something like that,
Yeah.
which is a really nice price for that. I think they still fetching something like that. No, the chat is gonna kill me because my headband is not even. But anyway, um, but yeah, then I replaced the carbon. I replaced it with the carbon fiber headband. It's really easy to replace if you already have this
Yep.
kind of headband because there's just a screw here and there's a screw here, and you just take them out and then the whole thing just comes right off. It's really
Just make sure
easy.
that you make sure you put it on the right way around.
Yeah, that's the only part that's annoying. It's really weird.
Yeah.
But these are the new pads. Okay, you know what? I don't know if I don't remember if you did this in the LCDX review or not, but this is how you can tell which one is the new pad. When you push it, it just comes right back out immediately.
Yeah.
Like the memory foam, you push it in, it takes a while to like come back to its original spot. This one just
Yeah.
that's what the new that's
I
how you
didn't
can
have an
tell what
old
the new
one
pads look like.
side by side, so I didn't do that. But that's good to know.
Yeah, so that's
Um,
what that's
but
the new one.
they do feel different, like when you're wearing them too, like on your head, like the way that the pads sort of compress. It actually feels like the headphones are closer to your ears
And
because they're
I
compressing
think
more.
the pads also are like I noticed that a lot of people complained before about um like you know how an ANC headphones have like this pressure,
Yeah.
like some of the LCDs actually do have
Yeah.
some of that pressure, and with these new pads I feel more of it than I did with the old ones, and I think that was one thing they tried to do is improve the seal further with the
Yep.
new pads. But yeah, they are shallower. I've heard some people's ears are hitting the phasers now, which is really no bueno. But
So
thankfully, that hasn't happened to me yet. But
yeah, I was gonna say I've seen that a few times now as well. I love Odyssey build quality, but they need to work on the tuning. They have. That's sort of the point.
I
That
still now to that point, I still think the tuning could be
oh
better.
yeah,
Like
absolutely.
the like the graph that I actually had, well, I had Odyssey replace these obviously, but I also asked them to graph it. I can't release the graph right now. I've asked them if they can release the graph of like all the new headphones with the new pads. So hopefully they do that at some point.
Yeah.
But I can tell you it definitely measures better, and it doesn't sound it does sound a little bit different, but like the driver capability is all still about the same.
Yeah.
But for me, the phaser is still too, this is going to sound stupid, but it's still too bright. Like the peaks that the phase, actually, a lot of Odyssey headphones have this problem, and apparently it might be the leather pads, which someone still needs to investigate, is that there's too much air and like there's too much like
Oh, as opposed to
on
like the
this
vegan
pair.
pads that aren't.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, like no, I mean as a yeah, right, yeah, I thought you meant the suedes there for a second. I'm like, yeah, if only they made those again.
Actually, Mad Economist sent me some of the suedes, but I haven't
Oh,
tried
did
them.
you really? Oh, you actually
Yeah.
managed to find some? Wow, yeah, those went
They
out of
think they're
production like
old.
years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aussie pads usually last quite a long time though.
I'm just I'm nervous about taking the pads off.
Oh yeah. It's not that bad. You just pull and it's not held in there as strongly as you think it is. It
Well,
is a decent amount of pressure, but I don't think you're gonna break it.
yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so that's the new pads. They do measure better. They're still too bright. At least this one. There's a little too much 6K, and I think I might have actually cut even more 10.5. Well, that's where my ears, I think, peak
Hmm.
on the new pads. But the mids are definitely a lot closer now. So it's only like 2 or 3 dB of a boost there
Yeah.
that I'm looking at. As opposed to before, you're gonna need like 5, 6. So they did improve it a bit, but
So that was the thing
yeah.
for me with the LCD-X and XC, and then in both cases it made it so much easier to EQ, right? Because like
Those are very different now, I think, because of the driver change. I think that the
yeah,
driver change may have done a bit to try to
as well,
fix
yeah.
the air thing too. I believe they're aware of that.
What I'm also partially, I mean, there is still too much air on both of them, I think, but what
Maybe
I'm
it's just the drivers decide.
yeah,
I don't know.
what I'm a bit worried about, well, not worried about, but what I'm unsure of is because I didn't have two LCD X's side by side, old versus new, EQ to the same target. So what I'm not sure about as confidently, like obviously the tuning is much better on the new ones, but for people who were doing EQ, if taking out two magnets and two phasers and respacing out the array, if that had a significant impact on the technical performance, like my gut instinct is to say no, it didn't,
Everyone said that it might. But I'm
but it
actually
might.
sort of impressed that
Yeah.
it didn't. Like
So
according to
like
you. I haven't
I
heard
mean
it yet,
that's
but
that's the thing, like I'm not like 100% confident that it's exactly the same,
okay.
because I didn't have them side by side, but I also think the trade-off is worth it because not only did it like even if it's like not 100% as crazy, the tuning change is for the better, like 100%, like very obviously so. Even over the old one, I think, like the one before 2020, and then it also got lighter to the point where in both
Yeah.
cases they're it's much more tolerable for long sessions. So, I think if that was like the price, if the price to pay was a very slight change in technical performance, I still think it's probably worth it. Now, with that said, I like subjectively from memory, I don't really think that there was any
Right.
difference. So, but maybe, but you'll need to hear it.
That's a big that's one of the reasons I actually got rid of my 1990 review is people underestimate how good, like greatly underestimate how good their auditory memory
Oh
of a
yeah,
headphone experience is.
yeah,
It's really like I've had some crazy experiences. Like the first time somebody told me the 598 has a better soundstage than the 650, I was like, no. And then like the next time I had them side by side, I'm like, oh my God, I was completely wrong about this. Like especially stuff like that, stage and details,
yeah.
very hard to like internalize. It's just it's the way we are. In fact, comparing headphones is very hard to do unless like ideally you actually something I'm looking for if I ever start we're doing a lot of comparisons again, is I need an amp with two outputs.
There are
And
some actually.
like
Jude has one, and he was recommending it to me
I
for
think my
exactly that.
789 had one, and I loved being able to plug in two headphones and just take one off and put one on, not having to like
Yeah,
even just the shifting of cables around was enough to like lose my memory. Like it's your impression of sound is like gone. Like realistically, you want to somehow have a headphone materialize immediately on your head. Like if I could do that, I would like
yeah.
insta switch between it. Like that would be nice.
Even just, it's,
Yeah,
yeah.
even that helps a lot.
Um,
So yeah, it's
I think
anyway, that's one of
actually,
the reasons why. Because I always wanted to compare them directly to the DT880. That's what I should have done. But I still
actually,
think the 880 was a little bit better resolution wise. From but again, this is auditory memory, so I'm probably wrong again.
Mad sent me a way to do it with this. He made this little thing
Oh,
here, so that with two outputs. So that should, in
oh,
theory,
was that like
help.
a splitter? I
I think
guess.
so. Yeah, I think that's what that's
Okay.
for. I haven't actually he sent it not that long ago, and I haven't had any time to really set anything up and actually use that. But I think it'll be very helpful. The challenge though is when you're comparing stuff that has different like sensitivity and impedance. So like, so I'm not
Yeah,
sure how that's gonna work.
that's
Because you have to
yeah.
volume match.
Super got it. Two
Yeah,
outputs and two volume pots.
exactly.
That's what
Yeah,
we really need. And I
yeah.
don't really know of
Both
anything off the top of my head that has that.
both SPL calibrated at the same level.
Yeah, right. If you're a Resolve, you need that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Anyway, that's a rabbit hole. What else did we miss? So, all
um,
right, let me answer
yeah,
this
yeah,
real
yeah.
quick, and then we'll get Martin because Martin's privileged anyway. Um, someone said, "Oh, I tried the VC at CanJam. What do I think compared to Utopia Stellia?" Oh God, that's actually something I've always wanted to try, and I think Resolve talked about his impressions earlier. I've never directly compared those, so okay, never mind. I thought I was going to be able to answer that, but I
Wait, you
never like.
haven't heard the Utopia?
I have. I heard the Utopia Stellia and the VC all at CanJam, but like it wasn't back to back enough for me to say for sure,
Right.
which one I like better. But the VC is one of the better tuned. I was surprised because I always found the Veritake pretty weird around like 5K, and
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
VC sounds like it has a little bit more upper mids and less of the 5K, which is weird because the graphs look very similar actually,
Yeah. But
but they
again,
sound a
that's
little more
the
different than that.
pad
Oh,
compression
you
and
said
clamp.
the
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Oh,
what's
that's
going
right. The
on.
Verite Open has enormous differences between like positionally when you put it on your head. I don't know if you probably noticed that a lot.
Yep.
Like depending on where you even wear it, let alone the pad, like the headband clamp. Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
it's too many variables. I don't like this hobby anymore.
um,
Anyway,
yeah.
Martin here. Is
I was
that
going to
even a
say actually
thing?
just with Utopia and Stellia, like for me, I would actually probably rank VC above Stellia. Um,
Wow. Wow.
yeah, for
Is it the
soundstage reasons.
stage?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I thought so. That might be
Um,
it.
yeah, I like there was a time when I kind of thought, oh yeah, the Stellia's soundstage is decent, but I think the reason for that is the FR. Like how like you can kind of have some fun with FR and get an enhanced
You
sense
can
of
adjust
stage.
the
Yeah,
stage. Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's probably why. Whereas with the VC and the VO, they're not massive for soundstage, but they're definitely decent. And for the VC for a closeback, pretty good, right? Like because closebacks often don't have that much going on for soundstage, anyways. But pretty decent on the VC.
Yeah, I know Zach was saying that he had like there was like the most space behind the cups of any of the
Yeah,
models he had made with the VC. That's one reason why he did it.
yeah. With Utopia, like I think Utopia is it's not a fair comparison because it's open versus closed,
Yeah,
right?
it's pretty different.
Yeah. Um, so okay, so Martin asks, which
Yeah.
headphones amp would you guys recommend to people with the need to plug into headphones? There's one from, I feel like there's one from, uh, I can't remember the company, but it's the HPA something. Um, for some reason, the name Benchmark sticks in my memory, but I don't think it's that. MyTech actually makes something with two headphone outputs as well, but I don't know anything about the device. I just remember going to visit them their um, warehouse there, in not warehouse, but their, I don't even know what to call it, like a listening room in Brooklyn. They had a ton of stuff there, like they had stacks and all kinds of cool stuff. Um,
Oh,
yeah, it was really cool to talk to those guys. And they had some weird little output device that allowed you to use two headphones from the same output, if I remember correctly. Um, so kind of like a splitter type thing. So that would be an option. But yeah, for some reason the benchmark sticks in my mind
hmm.
for one that does that. Whatever Jude uses, and yeah, maybe you guys can ask him.
I think he's got a custom.
It might
Yeah, he's
be,
THX made him a custom amp. I forget what it was. Maybe it's because it had a 1x gain. I can't remember what they did,
yeah,
but it was interesting.
yeah. So that would be, yeah. I mean, I thought like maybe the initial intention for something with two outputs would be so that two people can be in the same room listening to the headphone music at the same time. Like maybe like hanging out with a spouse or something, and you're both listening to headphones, which is sort of a weird concept. But
Yeah. What are you doing with this time?
yeah, but for reviewers, it's super useful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Resolve doesn't like stacks. He hardly talks about them. Just because I don't talk
Oh
about something
God,
doesn't
here
mean
we
I
go
don't like
again.
it. I think he's deliberately
Yeah.
trying to trigger it. It's the other thing I think people don't necessarily realize is like it's not like reviewers have access to all things at all times. You
Stacks
know,
is hard to get a hold of. That's
it,
that's
that,
one of the problems.
yeah,
I
it's
have always wanted to do that LCD4 versus 007 review, and I think Resolve is with you on that one. Those are like
yeah,
I love the 007. That thing is amazing.
yeah, yeah.
So, but the problem is like who, like, I think one of the issues is who is even dealing those in the US? I don't know if, do we even have a dealer for stacks in the US?
Well,
I don't
wasn't
remember.
Woo Audio
Oh, were they actually? Okay.
at some point?
I
I
was
think
like,
they were selling
how do you even
stacks.
get one? How does a consumer get one
Well, because they
from a
were making all
dealer?
those all those amps for stacks
Oh,
specifically.
whoa.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's why like when we were at CanJam, they had them like there was the Woo Audio setups with stacks,
Oh, right.
there.
And then
Yeah.
who makes the what's the other one? The Blue Hawaii. They
Oh,
probably, I don't know if they actually sell
yeah.
stack stuff, but
That's a
they
that's an
always,
old school combo.
yeah, that's like tile grade.
Yeah.
God, that was that long ago already. Anyway, yeah, but the thing with stacks is that the frequency response of a lot of their models is pretty strange. Like there's
hmm
always seems to be this problem at 1.5K or 1K or I don't know what it is with the like the lambda shaped models are all get this weird shout. The resolution is out of this world for a lot of them. Really
How's
impressive.
how's the dynamics?
Uh yeah, see, I don't even care as much about dynamics as some people or a lot of
Max.
this community. I basically like I don't care about dynamics until we get to like DCA where it's like everybody can hear how
Yeah.
strange like music sounds through those to some degree.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not as good as that's not even close to like not just not as good, but not even close to like a Focal for the
Yeah.
Slam at all. Not even close to that. So
Yeah. Man, spending more time again. I said this in one of the recent streams, but spending more time with the Utopia here. I got cables wrapped around it. With this, the the like narrative around the Utopia is wrong. Like if I say Focal Utopia, do you think kind of bright?
I do think kind of bright. I
It's
mean,
warmer than Harman.
it's the last time I heard it, yeah, I think actually the last time I heard it, I was like, this. Oh, I know what it is. So I did think it was bright the last time I heard it in a quiet environment, but the decay is so lightning fast on any of the peaks in the treble that you almost don't really notice it very much. So it
Yeah.
doesn't sound as bright as it measures, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense, but that
Well,
was my
here's the thing
experience.
though. It doesn't actually measure bright either. It measures with it measures warmer than Harman, like in the treble, like a little I could show you the measurements, but
But it's got
slightly
the, but
warmer.
doesn't it has these small
Series
features in
of
it?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
series
okay.
of peaks. So what I noticed with it, and I think this is why there's a perception there. And I was talking again with Matt about this, and I asked him about like why is it like well, what would we expect from this sort of ragged treble response? Because all the focales seem to have it, and in the
Yeah.
Utopia, it's actually probably the most interesting. Um, there's a series of peaks there in the treble that actually are they balance one another out really well. Because if you think about like how harmonics work, it's
Oh,
it's
oh,
just
oh.
going to mean that music, even though music is much more complicated and complex
Right.
than test tones, stuff that would token those particular harmonics would sound louder than stuff that wouldn't, and so that's I think responsible for why some people think that there are certain that it's brighter because when they're listening to music that tokens those particular things, it might actually sound like that because it'll be a little louder there in the treble. The other aspect is when people talk about timbre, I think that's exactly responsible for it. I think actually Matt agrees on that. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but um, that it's because of those peaks that are technically all balanced. And then the other thing too, which I showed you the frequency response I think of the like 1/3 octave smoothing on the Utopia compared to Harman.
I think you did. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty warm when you smooth out all that stuff.
yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. So
I remember that. Yeah.
yeah, so that I mean, if you're doing an apples to apples comparison with Harman, it is actually warmer. But because headphones frequency response isn't like because the actual frequency response isn't smooth like that. It's way more fine grained with all those little peaks. It's not perceptibly as warm as it measures. But I still think it's a mostly neutral headphone. Like I think it's more neutral than people think.
To me, timbre has always been like the overall shape of like certain regions of the graph.
Yeah,
I don't know. That was how I've always defined it, and I mean that kind of it's I say this, and it's a little bit of a joke, I think, between Resolve and I that like the 650 happens to have a little bit of a peak around 5K,
yeah,
and then I saw so many people liking the
yeah,
Borealis,
yeah, yeah.
which was, and they're like, this has such good
Wait,
timbre, and if you and when the measurements came out, they had like exactly the same
was
like
it?
peak in the same
No, it
spot.
was the 580, not this. I mean,
Was it
650
the
and 580. 580
pretty?
has it as well.
Yeah, just generally the Sennheisers tend to
Yeah,
have a little peak there, and I
yeah,
missed that. I missed that for years. I always just used to drop 3.5K. So sorry guys, I'm really deaf. That's an
yeah,
unusual spot. Like most headphones tend to peak 6K somewhere, a 10K somewhere, 3.5K somewhere,
yeah,
and then bass can be whatever.
yeah,
But
yeah,
those are like the spots that I always EQ because most headphones tend to be around there. So I definitely missed that about the sound. It's a little bit strange.
yeah.
But
Well,
anyway,
the Borealis 5K is way more noticeable than the
yeah.
650. But
The
in part
time I
because of the rest
heard,
of it too. Like,
I still don't think I've heard a production Borealis, but I heard a pre-production a long time ago that when it didn't even have the current chassis that people seem to either love or hate. Um, and it basically sounded really, really accurate, except I heard something. I think I thought it was 6K at the time. I was like,
yeah,
there's a little bit of something going on here, but it's not
yeah.
like that bad. And it slams really, really well.
I like it. It's one of the few open back dynamic driver headphones that actually has it's got a mid bass shelf. I mean,
Okay.
it still has like all kind of open back dynamic driver headphones. In the sub bass, they'll eventually roll off a bit.
Yeah.
Almost all of them. I think ZMFs are the counterexample to that. But yeah, with the Borealis, it actually went up near 100 hertz, like almost perfectly matching the target there. So there's a, you know, fairly pronounced punch to that one, which is really nice. And overall, like it sounded like if you look at the rest of the frequency response, it's actually very similar to the Utopia, just with more 5K. So a little forward in that sort of mid-range region, 1.5 to 2K ish, and then instead of the Utopia's kind of smooth, kind of like balanced out treble with the peaks being there, it's like it has those same peaks, but then like 5K.
Yeah.
So Sorry, I just
Abyss
see.
12.
Yeah, I don't know if it like he's just voicing his preference for it,
I mean, the TC
or
has like ridiculous detail, but the FR has got some of the Odyssey issues. Like the air is like crazy,
I have
crazy loud.
some.
I haven't heard it since the show,
Yeah,
though,
they
so
may
that's what I
have
remember.
done revisions to those
I
because
have
they
no
do
idea.
change stuff. Yeah, I have some thoughts on that stuff. And just if you look at like all of those ridiculously detailed planars, and I mean this goes to some of the other testing that I've been doing with a lot of planars lately. Um, what I've noticed is that there are certain designs that like it feels like that crazy treble air stuff is just like a consequence of the transducer that is really difficult to control. And because of that, you don't actually get particularly well balanced frequency responses with the most detailed headphones, with the most detailed planars, like the LCD4 and the Abyss AB1266. With the one
HE1000's got the squiggle meme going on.
HE1000 SE in particular is like also
Like
what the
really,
hell like.
yeah,
So I think that's like an inherent issue when you have stuff that's that detailed when dealing with the nanoscale stuff. I'm not actually sure about the Abyss stuff, but in the other cases, yeah, it's the nanoscale stuff. When dealing with that tech, I think that's you have a lot of challenges with actually controlling that stuff. The only one that I think has done it is the Susvara. The only one that's actually like out of the box. I mean, maybe certain LCD4s, Flux's LCD4, maybe,
yeah.
but
I have a feeling that has something to do with the pads on it too. But
yeah,
anyway,
probably. But um, that's why like I don't know. I think it's almost kind of like a tech demo in the not tech demo, but like a tech demo in the sense of like, hey, let's see what we can do with making the most detailed thing we possibly can,
yeah.
and then the consequence of that is this ridiculous treble air. And that part of me, like on the one hand there's that, and then the other hand it's like, are engineers the people who actually know what stuff is supposed to sound like? Not necessarily in all cases. So they might just be engineering for certain acoustic parameters that are also desirable, just not necessarily from a tonal balance standpoint.
Well, you know who could answer that, right? Dr. C.
Yeah, that's true. I've been meaning to try and get him on the on the live stream.
Yeah,
Um,
I asked Grover about that too, and apparently there are plans to try to get. For those who don't know, Dr. C is the I think he's the CTO actually of
yeah,
Odyssey, and he's kind of the guy behind the planar tech that they use. So everyone wants to see that. I
yeah,
think who's interested in this channel. So
yeah. Stormtrooper says Rebel Amp pair well with Focal Radiance. Yep, that is a great pairing. If you want Slam, that'll give it to you.
what's the deal with the Rebel amp? You seem to really like that thing. Is it just a good solid state amp that doesn't
Yeah.
cost overly much? I think, right?
Yeah, it's I would say for okay, I'm gonna put it this way: for most headphones, like dynamic driver headphones, and yeah, just most headphones in general, that's probably my go-to pick for a mid-range, like mid to high-end solid-state amplifier, because it's really good with a wide. It's very versatile. It'll do well with like inefficient or like high impedance stuff, but it'll also do well with IEMs and sensitive stuff too, without having noise floor issues or anything like that. And there's no ground loop issues as far as I can tell either. And then for really inefficient planars like an HE6, I would probably say the IHA6 is that same mid-level, mid-high-end level kind of benchmark. So there's
Right.
two.
I know you've been using that for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually it's funny because I keep going back and forth between because I have I've been doing the HE6 comparison with a whole bunch of different amps, and I didn't really like it out of the Phonitor X. I didn't like it as much out of the Rebel amp either. But out of the balanced output of the IHA6, it was like, oh my god, it was just nuts. And by the way, anybody who saw the recent post on ASR about the HE6 SE being a capable successor to the original HE6, they are not in the same league. There is a familiarity and a similarity there between the HE6 SE and the original, but as far as details concerned and slam, no. The original HE6, at least the 6-screw one, is nuts. And probably
Yeah.
one of the best. You can't buy it anymore, right? But like, it's a little bit weird because like the HE6 SE comes in at like $1,700, The original HE6 was only 1,300 or 1,200 or something like that.
Wow, that's yeah. Thinking about that price now, because I've heard heard Max's at the show, and way before that, I
I
actually
think he
Z
sold
actually
his.
had one. Or
Max
did he
sold his
sell it
since.
already?
Yeah, yeah.
Z actually had one. I visited Z once at his place, and he had one, and I was like, "Wow, that's really good slam
Yeah,
and resolution, but too bright for me." But that was probably because I have no idea what pads are on it. But
yeah. The
thinking
pads
thinking
do.
about
Yeah,
that kind of performance, which to me sounded like it belongs more in like 2 grand territory nowadays.
yeah, yeah.
For
Exactly.
that price, that was quite something.
Yep.
So
And
and that's why it was a classic.
yeah, and it's a real shame that they're not making it anymore. With the pad thing, the default pads are pretty weird sounding. Like the default leather ones
I
or
remember
pleather
Tal's
ones.
measurements were just like all over
Yeah,
the place in
yeah.
in the treble. I don't remember what he had.
So with just about all the pads, the best pads that I found out were the 2020 revision Sandaras, or they might have been 2021, but it doesn't matter. It's whatever the current Sandara pads were the best on it. The Susvara pads were solid because Danda sent those as well, and the HE400 SE pads were also probably the most normal for the upper treble. But in just about every case, apart from the 400 SE pads, there's a bit of 910K. So I think that might be what you're hearing. So like if you look at where normally there's like the dip at around 910K, like with the Concha interaction,
Yeah.
that's not there on the HE6 with a lot of pads. So I think if there's stuff to EQ, it's probably there. I'm working on that video, and it's going to come out probably next week sometime. It was supposed to be out last week, but I had to wait and delay it a little bit, but because I haven't filmed the B-roll yet. But yeah, HE6 original HE6 is good.
Gotta have the Joshua Valor be
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've already got the chest hair going. People still email saying, "Hey Joshua Valor, thanks for your reviews." So I forward him all those emails because I'm like, this is probably
Oh my
meant to
God.
be sent to you. Apparently,
Oh my
all beardy boys are the same person.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. Somebody asked. Oh, I'm sorry. You should take the super chat.
I was just gonna say on the HE6 front, last point on that until the review is that I'm so interested in what's going on sort of behind the scenes with the manufacturing there and why they're not making the original HE6 anymore and they're only making the HE6 SE because they're different drivers, and they have different various different properties, but I get the feeling that it's because they're set up, and this is pure speculation, so don't take this as verbatim, but I suspect that the reason why they're only doing HE6 SEs now and not the original HE6 is because they've switched their tooling over to produce nanoscale type stuff. Like they're marketing that a lot, like the nanoscale diaphragms and whatever. And the original HE6 didn't have that. So it's kind of like how hard drive companies weren't set up to produce SSDs.
Yeah.
And all the RAM manufacturers they were, and so hard drive companies kept leaning heavily into like hybrid drives and stuff like that until they eventually were set up to produce SSDs, and now they are. So I feel like it's one of those things where like there was a changeover that happened in what they were doing for the rest of their lineup that made it so that they weren't set up to produce these existing.
Yeah. It's not the same company. Like for example, as far as I know, Abyss is I would think most of their stuff is probably made to order, and like if they want to do something, they will just invent the tooling they need to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And that's one of the reasons why it's so expensive because it's so boutique and it's so in-house. Whereas like on Hi-Fi Man, you have to set up the mass production like
yeah.
tooling and all that kind of stuff. So
If
it's not quite the same.
Yeah, if you wanted to, just thinking about it, like if you made a new design that did better in certain areas, like of course the Susvara does better than the original HE6, and there are certain things about the Aria that's better, like soundstage and all that stuff, the refinement aspects. Why would you?
Sfara doesn't slam as much as HE6 does it, or is that just the problem with amping?
I
Do
would
you
need to
think?
have them side by side. I'm not
Yeah,
sure,
I,
but
I think I do too.
I would suspect not as hard, but it still slams reasonably. It's not bad.
Yeah, the HE6 just kind of like an anomaly.
It is, yeah.
So,
And I think a lot of that has to do with actually the thickness of the diaphragm itself.
oh, okay,
So when they
okay.
did move over, there's a number of things there with HE6. Like for example, and a lot of this is just from my curiosity and conversations with Matt, trying to figure out why is the HE6 so slammy, because it doesn't measure high in the bass or anything. But I do think it's probably diaphragm thickness, and the resonance frequency on those HE6s is really low on all of them. Interestingly, the V1 HE6 SE V1 has the lowest resonance frequency, along with the OG, and the V2 doesn't have as low a resonance frequency. But so that, to me, it doesn't explain it yet. I don't feel super confident in that explanation yet either. But
we gotta figure it out someday here.
We gotta figure that out. But at the very least, we might not be able to correlate it from a measurements perspective yet, but we can certainly correlate that with a materials perspective and diaphragm thickness perspective.
Yeah, that seems to be the way I'm kind of guessing about that too.
I mean, I was talking with Ryan from Modhouse about that stuff as well, and it also lined up with sort of what we were looking at.
It's a combination for planars. It's a combination of like what the magnetic flux is and the diaphragm thickness, and also the trace pattern can affect things a lot. Depending on so those are like I guess you could say the tunable parameters. That's why all Odysseys, well, the big ones have like the same basic enclosure, and a lot of them measure almost the same too, in many ways. But they definitely don't sound the same, which is what made me so interested in this whole qualia thing. I love that term. It's great. So, anyway.
Well, we'll get to the bottom of it eventually. Getting to the super chat here. LCD XC 2021 with EQ will be the closeback endgame for a lot of folks. Help us figure out what to lust after next. Speakers. What open back upgrade retains that combo of detail and slam? So I know Metal doesn't like the LCD XC20, or well, no, you don't like the 2016 LCD XC, right?
Yeah, I think the last one I heard was probably. There was another revision. Yeah, the 2016 revision did something to retune it a bit.
Yeah,
but then there was the memory foam. I really don't see. This is the problem with Odysseys. It's you have to know like the exact year they were produced and which pads you have on it at the time. And but the last time I heard an XC, I remember that there's just way too much 6K or whatever is going on, which is strange because even something like the 2 closed back doesn't have.
I have that here as well somewhere.
It measures like it has a lot of 6K, but it didn't really. I hardly could tell, and so I'm guessing the new XC is probably like that too, despite the measurement.
Yeah,
it's not as bright as it looks there.
And actually, the XC is an interesting one. I do think that the 5-6K peak is a measurement artifact to a certain extent.
Oh, okay, yeah, wow.
Because using in-ear mics again, I was, at least for me, in the way that it seals on my head, right? Who's to say that? If you had enough people, maybe there would be an average of a 6K
clamp
peak,
force. Right? Clamp force affects Odysseys a lot too. Something that I don't think I've ever spoken about is when I owned a GX briefly. I actually back bent the headband on it to a decent degree because the spring steel actually doesn't break. It does if the clamp really is too tight on an Odyssey. Oh man, Shankar's gonna kill me for saying this, but you can actually sort of reshape the
incoming a whole bunch of RMA headbands that people have broken.
Oh my god, I'm gonna be in deep trouble. They're never gonna send me anything ever again after this. But anyway, do this at your own risk. Let me say that. But I did bend it, and it actually stayed bent open a little bit more. Obviously, the carbon it's not gonna do that. No. But if you have the spring steel one, I bent it back a little bit. And the reason I did that was because I noticed when I had it on my head, it's so light relative to some of the other Odysseys, I think, that the clamp force was actually higher here than like the weight was on the top. And so it was compressing and it had, those come with the pleather pads. It was compressing the pleather pads, and when they're compressed, they sound like the air kind of compresses into a peak at 10K. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
no, I get that. Yeah,
that's kind of like what happened. And so I'm like, okay, well, if I hold them out a little bit, they're still sealing, but now there's no peak forming at 10K, and it kind of is flatter and more extended. So I decided to bend the headband a bit so that it would work, and it worked great. So like you get those kind of problems with all kinds of especially pads that are plush like that one. I think that was a memory foam model. Yeah,
I still need to get the carbon headband because those 15 grams, man, it matters. Or whoever.
I think it's 20, but still
20?
It's not. Every
I don't know where to get
gram
them.
counts.
Every gram counts. I know, yeah. Like that would take this down to the weight of an LCD-X, a current revision LCD-X,
Oh man.
down to around 635 grams,
Yeah.
640 roughly, pretty close. So I would. It's worth doing. I mean the headbands are so expensive though, like $200.
Yeah, they're really
and
expensive.
and for anyone like I think they're out of stock everywhere, but like for anyone who's like unaware, like it's I haven't I would just buy one, like I would try and just go through the proper channel to buy one. But the problem is that even through the proper channels you can't. So
Yeah.
I need to I guess reach out to somebody, find it through a dealer or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I got lucky.
Yeah, yeah.
You know who sold me one a while ago, and I don't think he had many left in stock either.
Yeah, exactly. So
Like, so they must have stopped.
yeah,
I don't know, but the other thing is that dealers, they don't want to keep stock on hand. So like,
yeah.
I'm guessing they don't sell that many of those because you're gonna buy. You're probably already gonna buy the LCD4. A lot of people don't even look at the headband after they buy an LCD2. It's just so expensive.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. But
But
yeah,
anyway,
I do think it's worth doing. I mean, for people who talk about like closed back endgame, I love this headphone. Like, I mean, I do EQ it and stuff. Like, I give it a bass shelf because I'm a bass head and a Canadian. Because all Canadians are bass heads.
oh my God,
But
that meme.
yeah, but like even just the default frequency response for this is so much more normal. It's probably the most normal frequency response of any Odyssey I've ever heard.
That's so strange, but
It
the,
is.
the measurements make sense. I that was like the most that was like the one model of the line that people didn't really talk about or own at
Yeah,
all. Like some years ago, now it's like now that it's been revised with the X, people are talking about it all the time.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's good. That means they concentrated on the ones that needed, to be honest, I think they concentrated on the models that needed the most help. The
That's
X with the memory
probably
foam pads was
yeah,
really strange.
yeah. It
It
was
had
it.
great resolution, but that tuning was not good.
Yeah, it's most normal by any Odyssey. Not saying much. That's
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Oh, somebody asked what amp I'm using. I just retired with the Atom stack. I'm not doing anything crazy. In fact, I still have the 789 D50, and I think I tried to sell the D50 by saying, "Hey, buy my D50." This T50S is out. No one's gonna buy that.
yeah. Um,
But I just use the
that's
Atom stack because
that's
I
the
don't need a
thing.
lot of power.
Most and this is the thing. Like people are inevitably. I'm getting back to the HE6 stuff. I'm a little worried about like some of the inevitable goalpost shifting that's going to happen, where people are like, you didn't use it off of this one particular speaker amp.
Ugh.
You need to use it off a speaker amp. It's like, no, you probably like amps these days have so much power. You can probably drive an HE6 to a sufficient level with a 789. Like it doesn't need more than I'm gonna throw a number out there, but like 3 watts is probably all you need.
Balanced 789 fed by a balanced
Yeah,
DAC is like gobs of power.
you
Like
don't need more than that. Like
that's
these,
why I had it around. I thought my Atom sounded just slightly better though,
yeah,
because I'm not that sensitive to Atom. I mean, I'm not that sensitive to amps and DACs.
yeah,
But I just switched over because I just don't need that huge thing
yeah,
around either.
yeah. So the that narrative of HE6's need a speaker amp, I think is just it's from the older days where
But people like the Vidar, right?
oh, they like all
I
kinds of
guess.
stuff. There's pair it with this obscure thing or that obscure thing. I say obscure. People who are in headphone
Well,
amp, we have headphone amps,
right,
compared to the speaker world, right? It's not actually obscure, but
Yeah.
back then, like in 2011, amps didn't have the kind of power that they have now. Like headphone amplifiers did not have that
Oh
kind of
yeah.
power,
It's
and
very
you had to
different.
spend quite a bit of money to get really powerful headphone amplifiers. And now you've got the Modius Magnius stack. That's 5 watts.
Wow, I didn't even know it was that high.
Yes,
That's unbelievable.
it's ridiculous. I believe it's 5 watts. The IFI Micro IDSD
Wow.
Black Label has something like
Oh, the
4 watts.
IDSD, and that thing is relatively small.
It's tiny. This
I
thing, I'm
could
not
not
sure, but like,
believe how much power that thing put out. On
yeah,
high
this is the
gain, you could like
Diablo.
destroy yourself with that thing.
Yeah, so like
High
you
gain on
don't.
the high gain is like way too much on the micro black label for most headphones like
Yeah,
in the world.
yeah. So I like this whole idea of speaker amps being a requirement. No, But I do think they take on the character of whatever amplifier, like more so than other headphones. So if you have, that's why again I liked it best off the IHA6, and this is just me being a pure subjectivist and not having any data to back that up. But you know, maybe there's a reason to, because you want it to be affected in some way. But
choosing a certain amp rather than like certain amounts. I think people are accurate in saying it's not even like the whole argument of you need it to be driven a certain way or whatever is. I think that's kind of ridiculous because it's not that. I think you're looking for the sound signature of the amp, and most amps probably have enough power.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly.
All right, let's see. Someone is asking me about some things. I actually have heard a bottlehead crack, believe it or not. That's a very interesting amp. I think it's got 120 ohm output impedance. I think somebody brought it to a meet I went to once and wanted to try. I had my K240DF at the time, if anybody remembers those. That is a stupidly hard headphone to drive. 600 ohm, old school 80s K240. And it is just like, I had to like max out this is why I moved from the Magni in the first place. I used to use a Magni Modi stack for years and kept upgrading it. And I was like, after that headphone, I'm like, okay, I need like something more. So the 789 seemed like the right ticket at the time.
Actually, speaking of 789, someone says it's the low current output, and that it's because of that it's not enough to drive the HE6.
I think so.
That might be true, actually.
It's current limited.
Because current versus voltage, right? That's always
current
the
is a big deal for the high-end hi-fi bands that are not like super high impedance. They're just
honestly
really
even
insensitive.
Even the Sundara is like this.
Yeah, that's
why
true.
I've talked to a number of different amp manufacturers, and they all say the Sundara is one of the more picky headphones because of the current stuff, and it's not necessarily reflected in the specs. Not that the specs are wrong, it's just that there's more there to do with the current and the synergy. And so I mean, I guess in that sense, as long as it's so I probably wouldn't use the SPL Phonitor X for the HE6, and that's probably why. And I had the same reaction with the head-to phone, where something that was high current tended to do better with it. So that's probably true.
I didn't really listen to it for very long. I was just like, oh, it's a bottlehead crack. I've seen lots of these. That's cool and all, but the other problem with the bottlehead crack is because of that output impedance, it's really narrow. Like the kind of headphones you want to plug in. Like, you definitely don't want to plug a hi-fi man into that.
Or a focal.
Distort probably a lot. Yeah. You know, I wish they would actually increase the impedance on some of the really high-end focals. I felt
Me too.
They could have gone like 300 ohm or 600 ohm even on the Utopia, and people wouldn't have batted an eye because why not go thinner if you can go thinner on the and lighter on the moving mass? You know,
I asked them about that in one of the live streams that we did. Why is it like? I mean, the answer that I got was not. I think what they said was correct, but at the same time, like they basically said that they approached the Utopia not with a mind to not constrain it by impedance, but they ended up with a situation where there was they didn't find any meaningful reason not to have it be 80 ohms.
It didn't seem to improve very much.
It didn't seem to be, but
adjusting the voice coil.
But I also don't know because I wasn't talking to an engineer. I was talking to a product manager, right? So
okay, well, yeah, that's
I don't know, like, I don't know, like, sure, maybe that's probably, to a certain extent, you could probably get a lot with 80 ohm, and it does actually, that's one thing about the focals that's interesting, that it in some ways, because they, back when they came out, the Utopia and the Lear, they kind of demonstrated that you didn't, it kind of was a counter example to the idea of high impedance, with an amplifier, right? Because they came out with these 80 ohm headphones that were so much more detailed and punchy at much lower impedances than we were typically used to. And so in some sense, that's I see why they're saying that, right? But at the same time, what I wonder, and it's still sort of left, I'm still unclear about it, is if you had a 300 ohm or 600 ohm Utopia, what could you do, And so I still wonder about that. But they also are in aiming for a different kind of market where they're, people aren't running amplifiers, and I mean the audiophiles are, but it's like what Sankar said at CanJam,
it's not about as as an engineer, I always say that business decisions ruin everything. But then again, you can't you can't just be a company and be like, oh, let's leave
Yeah.
the engineers on the law. I mean, engineers can design anything you want. Problem is, if you give them so long of a rope, they'll never stop,
Yeah.
and you never get a product and you never make a profit. So it's like a practicality thing. Like, will people buy this thing at
Yeah.
all?
Yeah.
But anyway, let's see. How bad do I think the HD 650 are for extreme metal? I don't think it's bad. I just think that the interesting thing about frequency response and people's preferences per genre, that's a whole topic in itself, is more like if I'm listening to a genre that's already mid forward like that, I don't want a headphone that's already also upper mid focused. Like, I would prefer using a Sennheiser, maybe strangely, for like electronic music instead,
Mm.
because you've got more bass and more treble, and the HD650 tends to be more upper mid heavy. Whereas if you're listening to metal, I actually want something that's Odyssey like probably, except with more, actually more bass in the headphone
AirPods Max.
FR. Yeah, actually, AirPods Max is no, not. I'm sorry, not AirPods. I thought you, for some reason, my brain said AirPods Pro, and I'm like, yes, AirPods Max. No,
No,
uh,
no, no. Yeah, AirPods Max is not a good.
but one of the reasons why I think the AirPods Pro is really good, actually, is because it doesn't have too much upper mids. It doesn't have as much bass as Harman at the same time, and that's like exactly what I'm looking for. That's at least my target curve. But anyway, that's because for me, I'm balancing those two genres a lot, because
Is
which is an interesting way to create EQs, because it's also a very conservative way to create
yeah.
EQs. Because that means you're never going to be too bright, you're never going to be too relatively upper mid forward, and you're never going to have too much bass all at the same time. So you get kind of this dull kind of things. Like, I get why some people don't like my EQs at all. And there are things they sound really dark. That's probably why, because I'm trying to balance out genres that are really weirdly, extremely different mastering. But anyway, that's what I think about like metal and headphones.
Is that
Um,
in part because of like for the upper mid specifically? Is that for the balance for electric guitar tones, and
yeah,
trying to
yeah.
avoid the biting quality of that,
Yeah,
making that more
exactly.
pleasant?
That's why I'm like that's why I tend to be so sensitive to upper mids. It's because it's for me it's a lot because of the recording. But then at the same time, like, people
Somewhere
think the
Sean Olive is
650
crying.
is, yeah, the 600 or 650 is like, especially the 600. How many people like the 600? I'm actually kind of surprised how many people prefer the 600, because it's even more upper mid forward already than the 650, and I think that's like, I think it's more forward than the Harman Target, if I remember right. It's closer to diffuse field actually for the upper mid bump on it. People really
Oh,
like
really?
that, and
Hmm.
they really like that because they like vocals, and they like good quality music, like good mastering music,
Yeah.
where maybe you actually want the music to bring the vocals forward. But like, if you put that in front of a metal recording, oh my God, it's gonna be like the amps are gonna be like searing your face off. So it's so dependent, I think, on what you listen to. I think a lot of people's preferences is more shaped by what they listen to than maybe they think. And this is why I can't
Yeah.
say there is one curve. There is never one neutral, meaning neutral means you like it. That's something that people also miss. Like, neutral means it sounds good to you pretty much, or it sounds right.
Unless
And
you're
so that's going
a
to be
Canadian,
different.
in which case you
Yeah,
put a
unless
big
when you want 10
subwoofer.
10 dB bass jump. I have no idea where this is coming from, but I just know you and Sean are like
uh,
going off on this on Twitter.
yeah. And
Uh,
someone actually mentioned the Dunu SA6, and I think that is a
oh, I love
perfect
that
tuning
thing so
for
much.
metal
Yeah,
because it's
exactly. That's
yeah.
that's not surprising why, like, you, it's funny, the SA6 is, I don't think that many people caught my mini review for it on Twitter, but like, I thought it was such a competent IEM, and I should have known that, because the first time I wore it, I'm like, oh, this just sounds okay. And most headphones that sound okay to me on first listen end up being like awesome as I continue to listen. And most headphones that are like really like I'm amazed by when I first listen to them get worse. Like, I don't know why, but that tends to happen to me, which is why
Yeah.
you can never trust my first impressions. But yeah, the SA6 is really everything
Solid.
is
Yeah.
really in balance, at least for me. The only thing that turned me off is that small 4.5K thing. But I
You got
would
to
rather
try
have
the
that than the
you.
Blessing 2 thing, the
Oh yeah,
6K,
yeah, yeah,
just me
yeah.
personally.
Yep, I'm with you.
Um,
Yeah.
but it is a
When
lot more expensive, so like, it's some trade-offs. I get why it's so nice. You told me I
you,
would love it, but I didn't was not prepared for how much I would really like the SA6.
you got to
It
try the
is so good.
U12T because it's like a
Oh,
super SAC.
I did. The bass on
Oh, okay.
that doesn't sound like it's a BA like
Yeah,
at
yeah,
all. It's really
yeah.
surprising. But I think my hearing doesn't go quite high enough to
Oh
appreciate
yeah,
the like 20K thing that it has way up.
Tia driver treble.
Yeah,
Pyre
very smooth though.
Records. Pyre Records. Thanks for the $2. Metal571 is back. He's asking probably if you're back to reviewing.
No, not really. But so what I'm doing, just briefly, so that we can get to the other super chats, or you can. Right now, my goal is, any company that's looking for another pair of ears on something before they release it or whatever, I'd be happy to, listen to prototypes and whatever. My goal always was to hear everything, and now it's at the point of, okay, people actually think my hearing is okay and like trust me, which is still shocking to me to this day. So, hey, if companies want my opinion on something and people think that that would improve the product if I make suggestions, I'm all for it. I'm not good with PR, as everybody probably knows. PR was never my thing. Like I don't not great at interacting with the community compared to to other reviewers, I think. So I'm not that kind of person. So yes, helping people behind the scenes is more like the way of being back. But I still talk about headphones and mini reviews occasionally on Twitter. But anyway, that's
Yeah,
where what I'm doing now.
yeah. It's I on that note, I think it's always awesome when YouTubers or not YouTubers, but like reviewers and people who know what stuff's supposed to sound like, collaborate with manufacturers to improve stuff. And I'm just thinking of Kryn with the
His like I really like the stuff that comes out that he's had
yeah,
some hand in. I want to hear that what's the Fearless
the
thing
John.
that he released. I never got a chance to hear that, but it looks like something that would be
Yeah,
really impressive as well. But
yeah, really
yeah,
solid.
once you've heard that many things,
Yeah,
even that fact alone, I mean, having some hand in, giving an opinion to a company, I think is very valuable. So, and
yep,
I'm not charging anything for any of these services. I don't work for any. It's just a hobby. Like, if
yeah.
they want to send me stuff and they can pay for the shipping, I guess that's the only part.
Well, what I like about
Then
that is
I'd
that
be happy.
it's you're um, contributing to the overall sense of more stuff coming out with that has better tuning, there's better sound, because it's being run by people like you or somebody like you, who knows what stuff should sound
Ideally,
like.
both of us will have
Well,
some input. I mean, more people. Just in general, I want to increase the number
yeah,
of reviewers
yeah,
who they that are trusted by various companies.
yeah.
I think
And
that's really
this
helpful.
it goes back to the question about like engineers versus
Yeah,
musicians, really, because that's if I think about, like, people ask me like
I'm
what are your
both of those things,
qualifications, like,
kind of. Yeah,
yeah, you are, yeah, and really the thing that I would sort of hang my hat on as a like indicator that I know what stuff should sound like. I mean, apart from just having listened to a lot of headphones, and my opinions have definitely changed, that's a big deal, right? But the other
yeah.
is that I've spent most of my life studying music, and so having these reference points for instruments in real life has
Right.
actually helped a lot, specifically with percussive instruments, because I was a drummer. We should form a band. No, I'm just kidding. But that, like, as an example, hearing a 5K peak, that's something that's going to be very obvious to somebody who is particular about the way their percussive hits sound, and you're going to notice that right away. Or when there's harmonic imbalances in one region or another, or also, I mean, if you've listened to electric, in your case, I mean, you've listened to electric guitar tone for a long time, right? So that might influence the way
Long.
you, yeah, yeah.
Too much
Speaking of,
damage. No.
speaking of, I mean, this is the question of like how somebody raised this question on Twitter a lot, but like how good are people's hearing, and
Oh
should they
yeah.
get audiograms or whatever, or audio, whatever the measurement is for testing person's hearing, and how
That's
difficult that
very
is.
basic though. That's the
It
thing. Like
is,
I
yeah,
think that that's a good test. Like we want to make sure that people can hear to like 8K, because I think that's like all they
yeah,
stop at like 8K. They don't go very far. Like there's no weirdness and dips. I think that is a useful test, but
yeah, yeah.
there's going to be some variances, a lot of variances above 10K,
Above, yeah,
based on age and whatever you've
environments,
damaged.
and yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking
So.
of of collaborations, got this.
He sent me one of those too, actually, and
Yeah,
I think I expressed my opinion on Twitter already, and
yeah.
yeah, I thought it sounded like an AC600, with
Oh, that's
like
cool.
more of a bass shelf, I
Yeah,
think, and then I guess the treble. I think we agreed that the treble was a little bit warmer than maybe even Harman.
Yeah, there's
Uh,
there's some issues with the treble. I think lower treble more than, um,
yeah, yeah, but
it's
overall, like the balance is way better than like the version he sent me was actually a stock one, which was very entertaining. So I got to hear the original, the regular firmware,
oh
and
okay,
then he had me update it to the firmware that actually it ships with,
yeah,
which is like I when I heard the thing with how like the regular earphone free pro, I think that's what it's called. I was like, oh my God, this driver can't be saved. And then when I put his firmware on, I'm like, what? This driver can do that? I
it's
was like, it's so
it's
interesting.
shocking to me how inexpensive this thing is.
That's one of the things
Because it's
about it, and
also
it
got
it, it
ANC.
fits so well. Oh my God.
That's the crazy thing to me is it also has ANC.
Yeah,
Now, I should note, he's actually
it's
sending
not,
me.
this ANC, but it is.
Yeah,
This is my like daily driver more times than not actually now, the
yeah.
WFXM3,
I think
but it's good for the price. Oh my God, it's crazy.
I think Tyler actually sent me one of those, so I need to evaluate that. But with Olive's earphone, which by the way, we still need to have Olive versus Olive, battle royale.
Oh my God.
The Olive
I don't think
Olive
he's gonna
Thunderdome.
agree with that.
Nobody, no, that's not going to happen,
No.
unfortunately. But with this, he's actually sending me another. So we bought one of these, and that's what this is from. It's right here actually. So we bought one, and it turns out that this one is quite hot in the upper mids, but
Yeah, he said some units based on the
yeah.
because I think he actually, and this is something that I give him a ton of credit for, is I think he evaluated like 5 or 6
Oh
different
no, he
units to
he told me
so
he
that he
evaluated like
knew.
50.
Oh, really? Wow, he went
Yeah.
way
Oh
overboard
yeah.
with that.
He
I'm
yeah.
impressed. I wish companies would, like, if I was tuning something, I would ask for that as well. I bet that's unusual. Like, normally we don't get to experience what the unit variation actually
Yeah.
is.
So
So some
he's
some units are, yeah, slightly
there.
different.
He did say that, yeah, there's some unit variation with these. Maybe it wasn't he evaluated 50, but he measured like
He
some yeah,
measured
a
a lot of
lot.
them. He overlaid them all. I think he showed me the graph at one
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
And so he's sending me one that he thinks is what his intended tuning is. So what I'll do is
Okay.
I'll wait till that shows up, and then I'll review it, because I don't want to be reviewing one that's, I'll mention, of course, that it's got, some unit variation there, because even he's said that, right? So I think it's probably best to see what the intended tuning is and then make the
Yeah.
judgment based on
He
that rather
just he
than
just sent me a stock one, and then I just
yeah,
switched it over to be his mode basically. So it wasn't handpicked either, and I thought it
right,
was fine. It's definitely too upper mid hot for me still.
yeah. But
But
man,
the thing,
for the
but that's
price,
kind of yeah. Oh no, I know for the price, it's awesome, and a lot
yeah,
of people, like I was saying earlier, a lot of people like that HD 600 kind of forward upper mids thing. So
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and I know what he listens to, and it makes a lot of sense. Like
Oh yeah,
he's a big like jazz fusion, I think, kind of guy.
yeah,
And yeah, that's 100% makes sense. Probably
yeah,
sounds amazing.
yeah. Alex Gomez, I just gotta get some of the super chats here. Danny King says, "Is the Chord Mojo powerful enough to drive the Aria?" Yep. Alex Gomez says, "Different versions of the same classic headphone vis-a-vis Hi-Fi Man, Odysseys, etc., is getting silly and unwarranted. Don't get it really. Please explain." So the
Planers in general, or
well, no, it's not just so. I mean, you could say the same thing about the HD 650s and various different. It's not
oh yeah, the revisions
intentional.
and stuff.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's not necessarily intentional. What people need to realize is that it has to do with the manufacturing process when you do a run, and so there's always reasons to improve manufacturing efficiency. Or say, for example, you end up in a situation where one supplier for a specific part isn't able to deliver that part with the same, consistency that they were before because of issues that they had, and that's often the case with pads. And then you're sort of left kind of holding the bag, like, well, what do you do now, right? And in some cases, they go to different manufacturers or suppliers for those parts. In other cases, like in Sennheiser's case, they've changed physical locations where they manufacture things. And in other situations, you just try and you're just trying to make it more cost effective to produce, right? So those are all generally the reasons why these revisions exist, and it's not because they necessarily want that to happen. It's because they found an issue, or there was something they didn't realize it was changing it. Maybe in Bayer Dynamics case, right, there were some revisions to those headphones that they didn't realize were
Something with
actually
the
causing
plastic
it.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, where like and in some cases it was like they didn't think that it would actually change anything meaningfully, and then it was somebody, I remember even somebody on Reddit like pointed it out, and then they were, oh, it actually does change it a lot, and then they went and fixed that, right? So there's a lot of this stuff where they don't actually even realize it. They think that there's no measured difference or noticeable difference, but then when customers get the product in hand, it's like, oh wait a second, there is actually a difference between this and then the previous one. Then there's other cases where companies are actively trying to improve and iterate on things, like what Odyssey's doing, and to a certain extent what Hi-Fi Man's done. In Hi-Fi Man's case, it was to improve reliability with the pads. That's at least what they said. And I actually think that's true, because on the old ones, the old Sandara pads, they actually were like, where the adhesive was connecting to the ring, it would peel off. And so there were just
a lot of people on the
they would just yeah,
I think.
yeah, that as well. Like the pads would just sort of die, be destroyed. So they improved that, and in so doing, that also had a positive effect on the frequency response. So, and then the last example would be cases where they're doing it deliberately, and I imagine that's something like what Abyss is doing, where they're like trying to constantly, they're basically just saying, yeah, well, revisions be damned, we're just going to try and continue to make whatever the best thing is. So
yeah, what annoys me about the Odyssey thing is that, at least in my opinion, in that memory foam switchover, it was a regression in tuning, not an improvement. And now that's something, again, like you said, it's suppliers, and they probably didn't have any control over it. But it's just really unfortunate that whatever they had to use was significantly way different frequency response wise than like the original intended design. This goes back to the whole business decisions problem again. There's long lead time on parts. People who, when you're trusting people outside of the company to make pads, they may not be in business forever. It's one of those things, like an engineer could build the same exact headphone to exact specs every time, but now your yield is like 5 units. And you have to set up your own pad factory inside the company. And like all this stuff has to be done. Like that's one of the big problems. And it's just but it is unfortunate when changes are made because they have to be, seemingly, rather than and they result in a worse product, and no one knows about it either, and that it's just really annoyed me. So
it's tough, man. And the more I learn about this industry, the more I learn how ridiculously difficult it is to bring some stuff to market, like for manufacturers to bring stuff to market, how ridiculously expensive it is. And people look at like Sennheisers are made from plastic. There's no way the material cost is same thing with Hi-Fi Man or whatever, right? There's no way the material cost is $300 or whatever, and it's not proportional. It's like, yeah, it's not about the material costs. It's how much money it costs to produce this stuff, to get the tooling set up for all of this. It's like, it's ridiculous. And so it's based on like how many you think you can sell in many ways.
Anyone can be like, I want to make a headphone, but oh my god, the startup cost to that
is ridiculous.
So high. You need to be like funded by what is it called, like venture capitalists or something. Just begin to like start a company like that. It's really big.
But I do want to note on the Odyssey front, so I don't think that the memory foam pad thing was their fault, but what I do think they could do better is I think they should just do the model years thing and just bite the bullet on it, because everybody's treating it like that anyways, right? We're all saying, like, so I think they should just like list whatever, 2021 LCD-X or versus 2020 versus whatever, right? And that allows them, I think it would allow them some marketing and communications freedom to be able to make the changes that they might want to make, rather than being stuck in this weird situation where people don't know what revision is what, or looking at serial numbers, or some of the comments that we've seen even in the live chat now, right, where people are frustrated about the revisions that take place. And it's like, yeah, it's understandable, but if they went with this model years approach, I think a lot of those problems would go away. But that's just my take.
And I think that today you can't, there's no hiding, like 10 years ago. You can't. That's why I've called on Twitter like many times, and I'll say it again here. If you're a manufacturer, release your internal measurements. Show us with data that you actually tried to tune the product.
Yeah.
and prove it that you've tuned it to something that looks normal. I don't care if it hits your target or Harman target or whatever. Just show us that you did the work, because someone else is going to measure it. It's going to be Resolve or
Yeah.
someone's going to eventually measure it and reveal that to everybody. And so when you make a revision like Odyssey did in 2018, and people, they're not, you can't hide that. We measured it, we showed that, or you did, and you showed that the pads had a detrimental effect on it.
Yeah. That
So
was also, I think, corroborated by ASR when they did their measurements.
yeah,
Um,
it's unfortunate, but like if you're a manufacturer, you need to do that.
yeah.
And apparently Austrian Audio has that new open back, and I want them to show that they measured it this time because of the closed back and no
Yeah.
response. And
Yeah.
I didn't expect one, but
Yeah, I just I'll get to I have more to say on that topic, but I just want to say
okay.
thanks to Rob Hawk for donating $13. That's
Oh
very
yeah, I
kind.
saw that. Wow.
$14. He says Resolve rules. Rob, you've donated a lot, and so just whenever you wanna, if you ever have questions, just hit me up on the forum and I'll answer them for you.
Flux is here saying hi.
Yo, yeah, hey, what's up, Flux?
Shelf? Yeah, I cleaned it up a little bit before the I got the K371 box back there, so that when Olive inevitably watches this, he doesn't hurt me. And then
I got them over here. I should probably
status over there.
yeah.
Yeah,
I should put the poster of Olive here and then just put this like hang it so that it looks like it's on his head.
Yeah, you need that. You need that. I got my Odyssey travel case, the 371, and then there's a COS ESP95X box over there, which is something I've been playing with.
Yeah.
They actually sent me this one I got for free, but it's just pads. They sent me the original ESP950 pads because I actually wanted to hear what that sounded like instead of the ones that come with it from Drop.
Yeah.
I haven't played with it yet, but I do want to play with that. But anyway, yeah. So
The one I had another what we were talking about before. Oh yeah, releasing
revisions and whatever.
and releasing measurements.
Someone's asking about the moon audio. I think
Moondrop.
Moondrop
Moondrop, yeah.
Sparks. Yeah.
Yeah. I need to spend more time with it. I've only had a brief first impression, but the tuning for the Moondrop Sparks is solid, and the
You
details
said I
really
would
good.
really
as
like
well.
it.
Yeah. But yeah, so I actually I had one other thing to say on the topic of measurements and releasing measurements. In some ways, I kind of see the last couple of years as, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, but the last couple of years, I think we've seen the beginnings of somewhat of a paradigm shift when it comes to headphone development and IEM development, with a bit of a sink or swim kind of thing when it comes to manufacturers paying attention to measurements, and the ones that are going to swim are the ones that are going to pay attention to that stuff, that are paying attention to this stuff, and they are. And the ones who are going to sink are the ones who are just going to kind of be stuck in the old, like, it's all just subjective preference, and it doesn't matter what stuff measures like. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at what's happened in the IEM world, how amazing tunings have gotten at much lower price tags and how competitive that is.
I think that's partially because of Critical himself.
I
He's
think
measuring
I agree.
so much stuff, which is
I agree,
really
yeah.
wild to think about.
And now that
yeah.
there's a lot of folks who have industry standard measurement rigs, 711 couplers, but yeah, there's a lot of people now who have that stuff. And to your point, I mean, you're saying somebody's eventually going to measure it, right? You might as well release your internal measurements. That, I think, is going to put pressure on manufacturers to do measurements that are compatible on compatible rigs, because I know there's even like Abyss has like I can't remember what their measurement rig is, but it's not actually a measurement rig. It's like a.
Oh really? Oh, I thought they were
Yeah.
buying a Gross.
They might have been buying a Gross, but before that, I can't remember what they were
Yeah,
using.
yeah.
They were using something like a KU 1000 or
K100 kind of
or
thing.
yeah, it might not have actually been that, but so it was something a little bit closer to that, and it was intended. Yes, it's useful if you're trying to ensure driver consistency and like driver matching and making sure that all works, but it's not an indicator of how something is going to necessarily measure the same way that a 711 coupler might be, right? You're not going to get the same information from that, like something where you're even like evaluating against target curves. So now I really think it is going to put pressure on manufacturers to be more meticulous about tuning their headphones, because at the very least, it's like at the very least they know that that stuff's going to be evaluated in those terms. So there's a strategic reason to do this now, I think, and so it's only really a good thing.
Yeah, like I said, if you don't release them, someone's gonna measure it anyway. So like,
Yeah.
I don't know how it hurts you. Someone's gonna find out that
Yeah.
you decided to make the treble 20 dB too hot, like
Yeah.
relative to even like I want to stress that I don't care if the curve is not like to some exact standard or matches harmony. It just needs to look like a normal curve. Like I don't want to see like
Yeah.
things that are really obviously weird. And if they are weird, then you need to explain. And one company who's really good at this is Dunu. They've been talking about their development process and stuff in detail. I hope they post more about it publicly, but like I've had conversations with the guys working on the tuning over there, and like, wow, they didn't even make me sign any kind of agreements or anything. They're just like, here's what we're doing to develop it. Here's the frequency responses of each revision of the prototypes, even as we've worked through this product. And this is as good as we can get it. And here's why we can't get it any better than that. Like, if every company could do that, like, oh my God, consumer confidence would be so much higher.
And
at least for this kind of audience,
No weird like marketing speak and key messages and stuff like that in those interactions either. This is what I love about Dunu is if they don't like something, they'll just be like, yeah, it's not really for me, but here's what we were able to do. Like like with the
I wasn't a fan of that tri-brid.
The EST 112.
Yeah.
So that's an example of like, my conversations with Tom were like, I think he actually had us hear it before he got a chance or something like that, maybe.
Something like that. I think maybe you did, but I was like next or something. It's not my thing, but the goal
maybe it was
the
the
product
Zen.
Was
one of them.
Maybe it was the Zen.
Yeah.
Well, from what I heard, the goal of the product was to have a tri-brid that fit into this price range, because nobody had like released one that was that cheap before. Yeah. And they wanted to, see what they could do with the technology. So that's what they did. It wasn't my kind of tuning at all, but I can understand, like, just because I can understand what the development process was, like, that's really good information that they would be willing to share that just publicly, totally.
Yeah.
So it's just...
And explaining... that point particularly, like explaining why the tuning is the way that it is, I think is key, because for a lot of us when we're doing the evaluation and we're going, why didn't they just tune it this other way, there are very good reasons why, like especially with some of the dynamic driver stuff that's been done, or where, I mean, it's the same thing with the EST with the electrostats.
This is one of the things where everyone is asking, just tune it physically correctly, and it's like, oh my God, that's
yeah.
That's such a loaded thing to ask, because I mean we've got headphones now with RC filters in there, which is just it's an EQ right in line in the cable, an analog EQ in the cable, because physically if they had tuned it in doing something different to the FR that they wanted to do with material or retuning the driver, other aspects like resolution or whatever that they've perceived would be worse. So like it's just not that simple. Like everyone who's against EQ,
that's what was going on with the Zen.
You need to be careful about that, because and I was surprised how much I liked the Zen. I mean, the resolution is not great, but like the Slam is awesome, and I understand what they were trying to do with that. And the tuning actually sounded better than it measured, even to my ears. So like there's this, knowing there were pairs of ears on it and there was a development process and thinking behind it, is so much more than most companies will ever reveal.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Mark Yoshihara, thank you very much. Thanks for the content. I truly appreciate the efforts and honesty you put into your reviews. I also wish Metal would put out more videos. I think everybody is pining for the days of
if you go back in the stream, I explained what I was working on, I'm working on now, which is just pretty much just like free consulting for companies who want my ears on a product to help improve it.
Yeah,
kind of a kumbaya, like let's make everything better kind of a thing. But
that's
it's a
really...
hobby. It's always been a hobby for me.
Yeah.
It started to feel like work, and that's one reason why I quit.
Yeah.
So,
Jeff, wow, thank you. $20, man. That's crazy.
Wow, you're getting some really...
this is crazy.
Figure out what you're gonna do with this money.
This is a lot of coffee. No, actually, guys, if you're wondering what the money is going to be used for, it's going to be used for... Well, we're going to be spending it on the team. So like,
nice.
flying Precog or Chrono to come visit us, have a meetup or something like that, or do
Okay.
send somebody to Can Jam, or that it's going to be used for that kind of stuff that because like the thing is like we're thinking maybe we would use it to buy headphones. We might still use it to buy headphones that we wouldn't normally be able to, but the reality is like we can technically just buy those anyways. So the more interesting thing would be to put on events or to do activities that we otherwise
cool.
wouldn't. And so really that's what it's for. We've put it into a separate fund for that. So it really does, like, I don't want to say like that's why I say like I'm not going to gate any. I'm not going to say you have to donate or anything like that. Like I'm going to answer questions or respond even if you're not doing that. But if you do want to support us, I mean that's one way to get it, so that I will answer the question. Getting to Jeff's comment here. Hi guys, thanks for the show. What's your favorite portable DAC amp for iPhone and Rune? And don't say none. Carry on. The Apple dongle.
Yeah. I knew that was gonna happen. I actually have one, and it's legitimately like fantastically convenient for like, what is it, $9?
Yeah.
It doesn't work well on Android phones at all, but like if you plug it into a laptop, it's awesome to have that other than onboard audio.
I think I mean I'll try and get something maybe a little bit more satisfying than Apple dongle.
Yeah, sorry, that was just a joke.
No, but I agree. I mean I'm not an Apple user,
It's
but like
fine,
for
yeah.
the other but yeah, I do think that question, you got to ask yourself what form factor you're comfortable with, because on the one hand you could use something like this. There's iFi Diablo, way more power than you'll ever need for literally anything ever, and also probably not the most versatile for sensitive IEMs. But if you're running, power hungry over your headphones, sure. So that's one option, but there are a lot of people for who that's too big. So then they'd look into, one of those Dragonfly things, right? Or something that's just literally like this big. You can get a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah.
If you want to know what I use, it's the Radson ES100. And this thing, the reason why I like this so much, apart from the fact that it makes your stuff wireless, sort of, not wireless, but like it Bluetooths to your phone, right?
Yeah, you can make your LCD-XC a Bluetooth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's got a AKM DAC in there, and it's got an amp. It's not the greatest, but it's fine. I think it's 4493. I don't know, something like that.
One of those. I used to have one of those. I have a BTR5 now, which is more powerful.
Yeah.
Very similar though.
So the cool thing about the this thing, and I recommend it. I think there's a new version of this now, but what I like about it is that it's got a really like fully featured EQ functionality in it. So if you really want to, and with an app, so if you really want to dive into that stuff, that thing lets you do it. So I recommend that.
I think it works on USB as well, or at least the FIO does.
Yep.
Too.
You can plug it in with
so
USB as well if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I take it with me literally everywhere I go. Vayu, thank you for the $20. Man, we're getting some high rollers here. this is awesome.
$50.
Jesus.
What is going on?
Thank you very much, Vayu.
He's funding the Can Jam trip. There we go.
Oh wow. Yeah. Wow. Thanks, James. You guys are all. You're very welcome, man. I better see everyone at Can Jam. Wow, Vayu. Thanks.
Hello was $20, and then better see people at Can Jam was $50.
So
wow.
I should note, we're going to be constrained by what's possible with border crossings. So if we're allowed to go to Can Jam, we will. And the one that's upcoming, the one that's I think it's going to be at RMAF most likely. I need to still like look into it a little bit more and when that is and so what's going on there. But if it turns out that we're not allowed to cross the border, we will at the very least try and send somebody like Precog. We'll try and send somebody because we have a number of folks in Seattle. So there's that, and then there's also the one that's happening, I think, in SoCal at some point. So at least I've never actually read any of this, but like people keep sending me links being like, hey, check this out. And I'm just like, okay, well, it means something's going on. But yeah, so at any of the Can Jams that we're able to go to, yeah, we do want to go. And of course we want to go to the one in New York. So if you're there, definitely hit me up and we'll have a chat. When we'll have
I'll definitely be there since I'm already in the US. It's only like a state away for me. Yeah, 2022.
What I liked
Yeah.
about the last one was how you guys didn't you just like book a room in the hotel?
Yeah, yeah. No, I booked early because they give you good rates. If you, well, good, I mean, relative to New York City. But I booked both nights. I booked 2 nights so that I didn't have to like
Hmm.
go in on the same morning as the show started, which was really annoying. But yeah, no, it's just they have the event in a hotel, and you can if you book early enough, you can get better rates.
But
I think that's on the CanJam site
what I thought was
itself.
funny is you live literally just across the bridge,
Yeah,
don't you?
it's no, no, I'm in South Jersey, so
Oh,
it's a
okay.
little bit
A
further,
little
but it's
further.
still only one state away. It's not that bad.
Okay. Okay, that makes more sense because here I was thinking because like we were staying in Jersey City, which is
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
we were
that's literally
across.
right
Yeah,
across. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah,
I'm further south, but yeah, it's not that far.
yeah.
Just a
I
train.
I really enjoyed it when I went. It was so much fun. Like not just I mean, Can Jam was awesome, but like going to New York and like we spent one of the days we just literally walked all around New York and there's just so much cool stuff to see. It was a bit like I mean I'm from a small town in like as rural as possible in British Columbia in Canada, so it was a very
Oh
different
man,
kind of
yeah,
environment.
yeah.
So
Oh no, that's the question to ask.
pork roll or Taylor ham.
Oh, that's dangerous. Yeah, that's a North South Jersey thing. So I'm actually from North Jersey, so I'm supposed to say Taylor ham,
Hmm.
but where I live now, it's definitely pork roll. Sorry. All right, continue.
Tech Cloud. Sorry, I have to get back to your question about the Moondrop Sparks.
Oh
I,
yeah.
I, I have to. I should let everybody know that like the Moondrop Sparks is going to be evaluated in conjunction with the Olive Earphone Pro, Free Pro, because it's going to be kind of like a true wireless shootout, like budget true wireless shootout. Um, and I can kind of spoil it a little bit because like what I've done is I've asked the guys to get all the like kind of less good or less not less good but like inexpensive stuff from Amazon, the true wireless stuff that is popular, and then also a few other ones. So there's one from Beats, two from Beats actually.
Oh, I forgot
Uh,
about those.
yeah, there's the Anchor one, Soundcore, Liberty. There's two from there. That
Liberty Air
yeah,
or whatever
yeah,
it
that
is.
stuff.
Yeah.
Then there's the Olive Earphone, and then there's the Sparks. And right now, like so I think that the Olive Earphone is probably the most useful because it has ANC. But the Sparks, I think, is the one that sounds the best. For because it's also like take a Moondrop Starfield and make it wireless, true wireless. Then that's basic. I mean, it's a little different, but that you get the idea, right? It's kind of like that, and the texts are definitely there with it too. So that's why it's awesome. But to your next question here, can we expect the review of the Burst and Soloist 3XP soon? Likely not from me, not soon, anyways. But because I think Tyler has that, or he has a Burson. I'm not sure if it's that one. No, maybe it's the Burson Conductor. I'm not sure. But I honestly don't get as much into the amps and stuff like that unless it's a tube amp, where stuff really does make a big difference. Because with amps, they don't make a huge difference. Um, so they
Oh,
do
see.
they do make a difference, but it's not as significant a difference as what headphones make. And they're especially these days like a lot of headphones that are coming out these days don't change as dramatically depending on the amp as headphones used to with the high impedance stuff from Sennheiser or Bear Dynamic, where it was like, oh yeah, run it off of this thing and you'll get a different kind of sound. Because these days, headphones are getting easier to drive, and in some ways, it kind of makes the amp industry side of the industry less interesting because you're not getting quote unquote scaling because there's no need for it. So unless we're talking about certain planars like inefficient planars where suddenly that question about current is relevant. So, but in any case, yeah, I'll probably evaluate the burst and stuff, and I got to evaluate some bioelectric stuff as well. Because I mean, like I'm not quite on the level of Crin with being amp agnostic. Because I do think they make a difference. It's just that I don't. The difference is not enough to where I care that much. Whereas if we're talking about spending $1,000 on some piece of audio equipment, spend that on headphones.
It sounds like you've become me.
Yeah,
It's like
Yeah.
I just don't I don't see the ROI on return
Yeah.
on investment
That's
on solid state amps. It never made a lot of sense. I mean, if you were intentionally trying to make something sound different, yeah, I understand why people
yeah. Yeah.
spend money on tubes, but just in general, it's source gear just
As long as it's good
it
enough.
yeah, that's why I'm still using an Atom. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's more than enough,
I do
at
want to
least for what I retired with anyway.
with that said, I do want to try some of the like really high end solid state stuff that is also
I
deliberately
think
trying to.
the trying out exotic
Yeah, the
source
exotic
gear is
stuff.
super interesting, but
Yeah.
and I have almost zero, if any, experience with that, so I really can't even. It still needs to be side by side with like an Atom or something for me to really tell a difference roughly.
Here we go. Ao says, or Veo says, I absolutely hated the 1266 and the A90. That sounds right. You got to hear the A90 if you haven't yet.
No, I haven't heard any of the other
Okay.
topping stuff. I used to do a D50 into. Actually, I think it was a D50 with my Atom, but then when the Atom DAC came out, I grabbed one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, Flux is always going to keep shilling the Niagara Tube DAC. That thing is
Well,
like, isn't that like 20 grand or something
it's something
stupid?
ridiculous.
It's
I don't
really
remember.
expensive. It's crazy. And I think Odyssey had one at the show. And it was
Yeah.
like, what the
See, there was
TCS? Yeah, that's another one.
that's one I would be really curious to try with this as far and see what that's all about.
I
Um,
think that's what
yeah.
they were really enjoying. Yeah.
With I mean with that, and it's funny because I think I to a certain extent I get the interest in amps and source gear and stuff like that because if you get a say you spend $1,000 on a pair of headphones or something like $1,000 on a pair of headphones, you want to get the most out of that. You know what I mean? Like there's a there's
Oh
an
yeah.
element of like I want to make this be the best that it can be, and so then suddenly people are spending the same amount of money on amps. And when in the reality, if you'd spend $2,000 on the headphone, you know, if you kind of combined that overall, you would end up
Yeah.
with a better experience potentially,
That's the
depending on
whole
what you got.
that's the whole head fight thing where it's like, no,
Yeah,
that's illegal. You need to spend a minimum of this amount when you're spending this much
yeah.
on the headphone already.
These days, amps are
I
getting
just
so
can't.
good and so inexpensive that it's
I,
that.
I can't believe like it just.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to look up that Magnus now to see how does that have 5 watts. I mean,
I
that's
think
just
it's 5 out of the balanced output
holy
or
crap.
something like that.
I have to look that up. That's
It's
just wow.
someone can
I
correct me if I'm
didn't realize
wrong.
amps were still like on the
Yeah,
rise, like value wise. I thought they had already gotten to the point where it's like
yeah.
incredible what an Atom gives you for $100, but like,
Here we
man,
go.
5 watts.
Flux says Sosvara on the Niagara was current limited. Barely got it loud enough for the
Oh,
show floor. Yikes! It was. I was fine with it. Max settings was complaining about power. Yeah,
the meme is that Max listens like twice as loud as I do. Every time I go to a station, a can jam, I'm like, all right, let's turn the volume like this first. But people
but
people tend to listen very loud at shows anyway. So
right, but I mean, to be fair, cranking it up to ear splitting volumes is what you'd be listening at a concert.
oh no, Amir is not gonna like this stream.
I don't think he watches. I don't think he cares.
I don't think so either, but
Yeah,
that's fine. He can make whatever points he wants, but that's
yeah.
funny.
But actually, just on the subject of those exotic DACs
Yeah,
and amps and stuff, I would do want to try
I think that's really interesting. Yeah.
the dangerous stuff. Like,
Oh, the dangerous music source and stuff too. Yeah.
yeah, just because people talk about it a lot, and I don't know anything about it. Haven't tried it. And I want to try the Socris stuff. I need to reconnect with Ryan from Modhouse about that. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's like on my radar for hey, maybe this is interesting. Not from a this is better from a measurements or from a objective standpoint, but from I'm curious what they're doing here. Like I want to know, and to a certain extent, that's why I find the chord stuff interesting as well because they are doing something that's not just off the shelf.
Yeah.
They're doing a more unique kind of thing whether that like from the ones that I have evaluated or listened to for a certain period of time, they have sounded pretty good. So I think they're probably overpriced as all hell, but because they're not using the off the shelf stuff. So in a certain way, like
Yeah.
from a design perspective, it makes a certain amount of sense. But
I was able to hear a difference on the Utopia, especially between
yeah,
it was a Hugo, the small one, the Hugo 2,
yeah,
and the really high-end i-Fi stack. I already forgot what that thing is called.
Pro I can.
Yeah, like I actually like the chord better, which was really interesting.
Yep, yep. Well,
So
the i5 stuff, I think their biggest limitation is that they're so reliant on the Burr Browns, the off the shelf Burr Browns.
oh, maybe that's most of the difference then. Yeah, but that was interesting.
Yeah.
The other time I like specifically remember hearing a difference was think I had, oh man, the Amethyst DAC, I think that's what it was.
Hmm.
Zach sent me some exotic stuff. He sent me that, well, relatively compared to what I had, and then he sent me the Euphoria actually.
Oh yeah, I have it in the
And
studio right now.
I A-B'd, yeah, I heard that you had
Yeah.
gotten that. I A-B'd that amp against like I think my Magni 2 or something, and I was like, I seriously can not even tell these apart. But then I
Oh, the
A-B'd,
Amethyst. Yeah.
yeah, and but then I A-B'd the Amethyst. No. Actually, the DACs were way more different. I
Oh,
actually
okay.
A-B'd the Amethyst against. Well, I had a Modi multi-bit at the time. And
Hmm.
that's yeah, that sounds very. Not I still don't want to say very different because it's not. But like there was something that was much looser in the bass relative. But
On the.
only I can only tell if I like on the Modi than
Hmm.
the Amethyst. The DACs actually sounded more different than the amps, and I was like, what? That
Yeah.
was weird. So yeah,
Wait, but
Source
the amp
Grid can.
being the Euphoria?
Yeah, the amps sounded less different than the
Wow.
DACs on that one,
But
which I was really like, what
that
is
would
going on?
also depend on the headphones because the Euphoria's got
Yeah,
some output impedance going on there.
I think I was testing the Icon and the Atticus at the time,
Oh, so
probably
those would be
with that.
300 ohm, and they wouldn't probably change their frequency response.
Yeah, that's probably that must have been why.
They,
But anyway, yeah.
what I noticed off with the Verite, 300 ohm Verite, is that it did not change. Like when I ran it off of the Kenzie, with the 300 ohm out, it hardly changed at all. So it does not have an impedance bump. I don't know if the
Oh,
Icon and Atticus would, because they might. I'm not sure. They're different drivers, right? But going 1 to 1 on output impedance versus impedance, which is something that you probably shouldn't do,
yeah.
and seeing it not change the frequency response hardly at all, like it was at most like 1 to 2 dB difference in the bass, was shocking to me.
Yeah,
So
that's strange.
that's why I imagine if you were listening to the one of the ZMF headphones off of the Euphoria, I would imagine I haven't looked at the specs, but I would imagine the output impedance there is around 100, something like
Yeah,
that.
I totally forget what the
Yeah.
specs were on that thing. Or maybe he loaded it with tubes that are
Oh, it could be. Yeah.
relatively neutral or something like
Yeah.
that, rather than sounding tubey or something. It
Yeah.
could have been why. I don't remember. It was a while ago,
Hmm.
but yeah, I was surprised at that. I was like, I always assumed DAX would make less of a difference, but it
Yeah.
depends. Well, then again, the Modi Multibit doesn't have the best reputation now, so
Yeah.
the
Um,
R2R is weird.
yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. I was gonna say, have you had a chance to hear any of the amps and sound amps?
not except for at CanJam. I think Zach brought one of those in, but I
Yeah.
didn't play with it very much. Yeah,
Yeah.
you said that was like very different, right?
The Kenzie is the most affected, but like still neutral to the point where it's like there's something other than
Interesting.
frequency response going
Okay,
on here.
okay.
Yeah, it's shocking how different it
I,
was.
I would I would hope so for the price that he
Yes, I
goes
know they're
for. That's
expensive.
the other
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. But
Isn't that like
just
2 grand? I can't remember. It's
yeah,
really
they're around two
good.
grand. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. Mark, what do you think of the YouTube reviewer, the Honest Audiophile, literally retiring his channel because he found his endgame headphone, the Empyrean? So people like what they like, man.
I
Um,
found my end game headphone and it doesn't have a good frequency response.
yours
Although
is the
the LCD2 was what I ended up settling with.
yeah.
I mean I can't blame anybody. Here's the thing about audiophile that gets missed very often. If you like something, don't like make other
Exactly.
people like don't let other people tell you that you can't like something. Like that's like the dumbest thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you like a DT990, yeah, I'm gonna laugh, but at the same time, like if you're having a good time, why
Yeah.
would you listen to anybody else about it? It doesn't
Exactly.
make
I think
sense.
that's true for the Empyrean as well. And actually, with the Empyrean,
Very true of the Empyrean. There are some really big fans of the Empyrean,
yeah,
but the thing about the Empyrean was, at least I felt, and I think I said this in the review too, is that like the build is like 6 grand ish quality, but the sound quality is more like 1 grand. But the thing about the Empyrean is that when I first put it on, I think I listened to it for like 3 hours straight because it was just so non-fatiguing and just pleasant generally. Like it's not, but at the same time, one man's pleasant and non-fatiguing is blurry and like, and its dynamics are not like super super like the bass is not super detailed,
Yeah,
and
that
the
was sort of
highs are
my.
not super high res for the price they cost, and all that stuff. So
I think there's a good reason why people gravitate towards the Imperium, and it's exactly that. Is
it's
it
the
has
easy
a
listening factor
yeah,
is
and
so like I
if you look at
totally
the
understand it.
if you look at the FR of it, it's actually really good. It's just a little relaxed for the whole thing. And then it gets a little bit messy in the treble, but like,
Yeah, it's a
and
little
then the
weird,
bass is a
but
bit
yeah.
warm. But like for the ear gain region, it's basically the right shape, just like 2 to 3 dB relaxed,
Yeah.
which is
I
nice. It's what,
actually, this is going to be really contentious. I think that's the word. But like when I first tried the 820, I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. Like some people are, I've lost all credibility just now.
no.
But that's because like I think the reason why I said that is because I was listening to it at the show where I had the 800S and then immediately after I tried the 820S and I was like, oh. Thank God. Like I think the biggest thing was, oh, thank God they fixed like the 6K peak is not there in the
Oh, you were
same
listening
way.
for other things.
I
Yeah,
was I clearly was like, but if I was coming like from like K371 probably, I think my
yeah,
opinion would have been
yeah,
like, whoa, this is very strange.
yeah,
But like it was relatively, man, that's another one that's very
yeah,
very bad to say. Oh, the 820 is better than the 800.
yeah. But I mean,
That's not what I mean.
getting back to the Empyrean though, like for
But yeah,
me,
I can understand that kind of
yeah.
thing, you know?
But for me, that also speaks to like that question of like how much do we care about detail and technical performance and all that stuff when we can gravitate to a tonal balance that might, like, I think people often index harder for one thing or another, and that might be the reason why people prefer one thing or another. Like for example, well, the Empyrean is a good example where the tuning might be pleasant, and that's all people really care about. They like that tuning and frequency response. But and if you compared the Empyrean to a even an HD 800S, well, it's a bad example because it's dynamic, but like compared it to an LCD-X, right? I'm going to say straight up, the LCD-X is more detailed than the Empyrean.
Oh yeah, no, I can believe that.
It's and so, but people aren't necessarily looking for that, right? So they don't want the sort of sharpness and incisiveness that you get
In fact, it's
from
probably
that.
too like the word clinical is like
Yeah,
perfect
yeah,
fit there. Like it's not as when people say musical, that just means that like mostly that probably just means like warm and no weird peaks
yeah,
in a lot of places. And like
yeah,
I think that's if this I hate that term, but that's the Empyrean is like the embodiment of the whole musical thing,
yeah. And
if you were to use it.
it's not like the microdynamics were particularly blunted on it either. It was so it wasn't
I
like
don't think they were
lacking.
great, but they
Not
weren't
great, but
DCA, I guess.
yeah, exactly. It's not.
Yeah.
It wasn't like massively blunted or
Yeah.
limited. What I found with the Imperium was that it wasn't tight or controlled enough, which was partially a frequency response thing in the bass, and then the lower
Yeah.
mids, the soupiness, but
Yeah,
also
it was a little blurry and like a little
yeah,
bloated kind of sounding
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing. Yeah, but
But also just it felt. I mean, I completely agreed with your point about if they just thrown all the magnets in it, and
yeah,
given
if they made a high impedance version and
or
like
a
thin
yeah,
the diaphragm further, like oh my God,
yeah, like a yeah,
that's a very
exactly.
interesting product. I hope they do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, like something that is more technically proficient, but with that same kind of tuning,
Yeah, I
would be
think
interesting. I
that
think.
would give like a different flavor. Say like a different flavor LCD4 would be very interesting.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you could kind of create out of that headphone.
But there's a potential trade-off there, and it's that when you do that, maybe it necessarily wrecks the frequency response.
Yeah,
So maybe
potentially.
they're dealing with that issue. We've been going for over 2 hours, so we should
Yeah.
probably end the stream. But thanks to everybody who tuned in, and a big thank you to Metal571 for joining me on this one. Who
Yeah,
knows
Resolve's been trying to get me to come on here for like weeks and weeks, and like
what?
everything has just not been lining up for me, clearly.
One day we got to get Sean Olive and Metal571
Oh my God.
the same, or maybe Sean Olive and Olive from Olive's Gadgets, and we'll have
Yeah, that might, I mean,
the Thunderdome.
I would love to ask Sean some questions live, but
Me too.
honestly, just having him on there alone so that you can just ask him is
Yeah.
probably less distraction.
Well, I
Get
need
more
to.
done.
So like I've read the research, but I need to pull specific questions from the research that I would
Oh,
have.
that
Like,
too. I
because
don't have that experience.
and there's a lot of stuff there. But with Sean, he has actually said that he would be game. If he's watching this, Sean, let's make it happen. It's just we haven't figured out a timing or a schedule, and I said I'd send him some wine if he no, but because I know we're both into wine as well, so we'll probably chat about that. But I'd like to do that anyways, so I need to go find some. But yeah, that's going to do it for the live stream, guys. Oh, last one here. Stormtrooper. Does the amps and sound Mogwai have a similar effect to sound like the Kenzie? Sound different but without affecting frequency. When is a collab new amp coming out? So yeah, that is actually something that I didn't know we were allowed to talk about it, but apparently we can. But yeah, there is some collab going on with us and amps and sound.
Oh wow.
Yeah, we haven't. I don't have the full details on that yet, but so just keep an eye out for that. And I haven't actually heard the Mogwai, so I can't really weigh in on the answer there. But I'll let you know as soon as I spend time with the amp, because we do have one. I'll do a post and give my impressions there. And what I like to do with those tube amps is I like to just measure the frequency response, like with the same seating for a headphone, just using a solid state and then the tube amp, right, and comparing and seeing how the frequency response changes. And with the Kenzie, I was shocked to learn that it didn't change at all. So what I'm interested in,
it sounded different anyway.
And it sounded different. It sounded very different, even though it didn't change at all. So, as I was talking with actually Grover recently about this, and he was referencing something, but he quoted somebody, I can't remember who it was saying that like if you're measuring something and you hear something different, you're probably measuring the wrong thing, or something like that. And I think that's probably what's going on here, is that there's something that's different that is potentially measurable, but we're not actually analyzing the right thing when we're looking at that. So. And it's not in distortion either, because the THD didn't change either.
Yeah, THD is not a good predictor of some audible phenomena. Yeah, that's what keeps me. This is a good way to end the stream. Like that's certainly what keeps me going with the hobby. Like I can't completely quit because I want to see what comes out of this. It's surprising that, a lot of sites are saying that. Audio has been solved for decades, and like clearly something else is going on, because I included are paying significantly more money than I ever thought I would for a pair of headphones because it genuinely sounds better, at least to me. And I think it's beyond just me being fooled. I think maybe I'm crazy, but
I think you're right.
There's enough consensus, surprisingly, that seems to be happening. So we need to find out why, because I want numbers.
We'll work on it. We'll get to the bottom.
We'll work on it, yeah.
Alrighty, guys. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.
Take care.
And